Hello, guys. Tonight we begin with the royal servant's morning at Versailles, a routine that somehow blended candle smoke, whispered titles, and endless polishing into what can only be described as a golden-edged fever dream. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background now. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you feel is the chill. Not a dramatic storybook chill, but a creeping kind. The kind that seeps into the cracks of your joints and makes you wonder if you slept at all. You didn't. Or if you did, it wasn't enough. Because at Versailles, sleep is for the gilded. For you, sleep is a short pause between duties. The room, or rather, the corner of space beneath the sloping roof, offers no insulation. You lie on a shared mattress that feels more like a sack of damp laundry than a bed. Above you, a crack in the beams lets in just enough moonlight to remind you you're not dreaming. Someone beside you stirs, mutters something about spilled candle wax, and groans. You can't tell if it's from sleep or despair. Maybe both. There's no real wake-up bell for your kind. Your body simply learns. It learns to rise before the floors are warm. It learns to notice the shift in silence, the moment when the palace groans and sighs in its slumber, as if dreading its own awakening. That's when you move. You swing your feet to the floor, flinch at the cold stone, and dress in the dark. Your linen shift smells faintly of vinegar and old sweat. The apron's still stained from yesterday's soup spill, but that won't matter unless someone important sees. You fold your hair back under your cap, smooth, tight, without a strand out of place. One loose curl could be taken as sloppiness, and sloppiness leads to scolding. Or worse, reassignment to the latrines. A small brass bucket waits just outside the dormitory door, the same one you filled yesterday. It's already been emptied. Someone beat you to it. You curse silently. Someone always does. So you grab your own bucket and join the procession, winding its way down the narrow, uneven staircase behind the walls. No one speaks. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because speaking at this hour risks starting the day wrong. You nod at Margot, who carries 2 pails, her arms already shaking. You don't ask why she's doing double duty today. The reason is probably somewhere between punishment and pity. The corridors you walk are never shown on the palace maps. These are the arteries of Versailles, the hidden routes that make the glitter possible. Past soot-streaked fireplaces and doorways that smell like cabbage and mold, down winding stone paths that seem to sink deeper than the earth itself. Every now and then, you catch the sound of music, distant and faint, like a ghost rehearsing for a party no one's invited you to. The water pump is always stiff, always groaning. It creaks like it's judging you. Your hands wrap around the handle, raw from yesterday's scrubbing, and you start to pull. The pump spits, gurgles, and releases a stream of icy water, so cold it feels like winter itself, pouring into your bucket. The weight is instant, the kind that makes your wrists ache and your elbows scream in protest. But you don't complain. You just nod your thanks to no one and begin the long march back upstairs, carefully avoiding the step that squeaks, the one that's gotten more than one girl sent flying when startled by a valet in a hurry. Above, the palace is stirring, not awake yet, but stretching. Fires must be lit, rugs must be beaten. The mirrors in the Hall of Mirrors must gleam, not shine, gleam. A crucial difference, apparently. Nobility doesn't want to see their reflection with any hint of smudge. That would suggest effort, or humanity. You pass by the scullery, where a boy not much older than 12 is peeling apples with a knife too dull to slice air. He nods at you. You nod back. He's lost 2 fingernails this week. The cook didn't even notice. As you near the royal quarters, your pace slows. The walls here are silk-lined. The floors are polished. One scuff from your wooden saws could mean scrubbing with vinegar until dusk. You adjust your grip on the bucket, whisper a prayer to Saint Zita, the unofficial patron of servants, and push through the final door. Inside, the first valet is already snapping orders. His powdered wig is slightly crooked, which means someone will pay for it. Not him, of course. You hand over the water. He sniffs and waves you away. You retreat without turning your back. Never turn your back on someone with a title. Down the corridor again, faster this time. You're late for the linens. Madame de Soissons requires exactly 5 heated towels for her morning routine. Not 4, not 6, 5. And they must be folded like swans. You have no idea why. No one does. But a girl was dismissed last month for folding them like doves instead. Apparently, it's tacky. You fetch the towels from the warming cupboard. They smell faintly of lavender and smoke. You hurry, but not too fast. If you sweat, someone will smell it. That's another thing. You're expected to have no scent, no sound, no presence. You are to move like a polite breeze, not a gust, not a draft, a breeze. You pass a doorway where laughter echoes, a soft trill, delicate and cruel. 2 noblewomen are having breakfast in their dressing gowns. One glances toward you and then quickly away, as if your gaze might be contagious. You lower your eyes and keep moving. Back in the servant corridor, a friend hands you a crust of bread she stole from the kitchens. You accept it like a sacred relic. It's stale. It's perfect. As the sun begins to rise, you pause by one of the palace's hidden windows, just a crack in the stone that overlooks the gardens. Mist coils over the fountains like ghostly dancers. For a moment, you allow yourself the illusion that you're part of it all, that you belong here, not just in the bones of the palace, but in its light. Then the bells ring, and the illusion dies. You head to your next task, bucket empty, hands sore, breath puffing in the cold morning air. Versailles is waking, and so are its demands. But you've already been awake for hours. It starts with footsteps, not loud ones, never that. These are precise, practiced, and perfectly timed, like the ticking of an expensive watch. The hallway outside the king's bedchamber fills with the quiet chaos of the lever, the royal awakening ceremony. You're not in the room, of course. Only a select few nobles are allowed that honor, those with titles long enough to require a full breath to recite. But you're just outside, holding a silver tray stacked with combs, lace cuffs, and a small bowl of warm shaving cream. None of it is yours. If you so much as touch the comb's edge without gloves, you'll be replaced by someone who won't make that mistake. Inside, the king still sleeps. Sort of. He's probably been awake for some time. Louis isn't known for sleeping in, but tradition demands that he pretend. He lies in his bed like a well-dressed log, while the premier valet whispers to see if His Majesty is ready to rise. There's always a pause here, long enough for the room to feel like it's holding its breath. Then, with theatrical reluctance, the king nods. The ritual begins. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn back with a swoosh that's been rehearsed 1,000 times. Sunlight pours in, catching on the gold embroidery of the bed canopy. You can't see it, but you've been in that room before, only briefly, during cleaning hours. You know every inch. The alabaster statues, the carved headboard, the faint scent of rose oil in the upholstery. You also know where to step so the floor doesn't creak. The nobles don't. The first wave of privileged guests enters the room, bowing low, eyes flicking toward the king's face for any hint of expression. Some are genuinely honored to be here. Most are here to be seen. The lever is a performance, and every player has a role. The king yawns. A valet steps forward to present his slippers. Carefully warmed near the fire, but not too warm. His Majesty once made a face when they were uncomfortably enthusiastic. A noble is handed the royal shirt. Another is granted the honor of holding a sleeve, while Louis slips his arm through. These are not tasks of efficiency. They are badges of favor. Being chosen to hold a bootstrap could mean a government appointment next month. Failing to be chosen could mean whispers, rumors, and exile to your countryside estate, which, let's be honest, is probably damp and disappointing. You wait just outside, balancing the tray, watching it all through a crack in the door. There's a strange comfort in the predictability of the ceremony. No matter how exhausted or sore you are, you know exactly what comes next. The king will cough. Someone will titter. Another noble will present the mirror. Someone will sneeze into a lace handkerchief and pretend it was charming. Then comes the quiet moment when the king is offered reading materials. This is where it gets tricky. If the king chooses a political document, it means tension. Maybe there's unrest in Paris. Maybe someone wrote something unflattering. If he chooses the hunting reports, it means peace, at least for the morning. Everyone in the room subtly adjusts their posture, depending on the page he selects. You've seen this before. The lean forward, the tight smiles, the sudden silence when the royal brow furrows. Today, it's good news. The king laughs. Something about a new fountain in the gardens. A courtier makes a joke about how it sprays more water than the last finance minister's promises. Laughter, forced and breathless, fills the room. You don't laugh. You don't even smile. You're not allowed to have an opinion on finance ministers or fountains. You're just glad no one has thrown anything yet. Eventually, the king stands. You step forward exactly on cue and hand the shaving bowl to the valet, avoiding eye contact. Your hands don't shake. You've done this too many times to be nervous anymore. That doesn't mean you're relaxed. Never relaxed. Just numb enough to function. The razor is passed to a barber, whose hands are assured by 3 different insurers, probably. You wouldn't know. But that man has shaved more royalty than you've had hot meals this month. The king doesn't flinch. He rarely does. Even the razor is part of the ceremony. An unspoken reminder that trust is currency here, just as valuable as land or lineage. Behind the scenes, the second wave of nobles is lining up. They've been waiting in the antechamber, practicing their bows and checking their wigs. One of them smells strongly of musk oil. You know because every time he passes, your throat tightens. He tried to speak to you once. You pretended not to hear. It was safer that way. The door opens. The second wave enters. A valet whispers names and titles in the king's ear, in case he's forgotten someone important. He usually hasn't. Louis has the memory of an elephant in heels. A third cousin twice removed is greeted with a raised eyebrow and a thin smile. That's a snub. Everyone knows it. You pretend not to notice. Again, by now, the room is full. There are at least 20 people milling about, each pretending to have a purpose. Someone straightens the drapes unnecessarily. Another rearranges a vase that doesn't need rearranging. The real point is to be present, to catch the king's eye, to murmur a suggestion, a compliment, or an insult wrapped in a compliment. Versailles runs on flattery and friction, and the lever is where the gears begin to turn each day. Then the king's stomach rumbles. Quietly, of course, but just enough to signal that the real business of the morning must commence. Breakfast, which, for you, means more work. You're already calculating how long it'll take to deliver the eggs, butter, warm milk, and morning pastries, each arranged just so, with the gold cutlery, not the silver, and on the porcelain with the blue edge, not the green. That was a mistake once. The result? A tray shattered against a marble wall, and a kitchen maid quietly dismissed before noon. The room begins to empty as quickly as it filled. Nobles offer final bows, backing out of the chamber with the grace of performers leaving a stage. The king nods once more. The first valet snaps his fingers. You step back as breakfast arrives on a cart, so polished you can see your own reflection, tired, underfed, and fading into the wallpaper. And just like that, the performance ends. The lever concludes, but the day is only beginning. The king is now officially awake. Versailles is now officially alive. And you? You haven't even had your crust of bread yet. There's still the queen's routine, the laundry delivery, the wax polishing, and that window latch in Madame Dinoy's drawing room that never seems to stay shut. You don't think about it all at once. If you did, you'd sit down and never get up again. Instead, you turn on your heel, tray empty, steps quick but silent, heading toward your next task with the quiet grace of someone who knows they are always being watched. And if not watched, then judged. And if not judged, then forgotten. Which, honestly, might be the safest option. It's almost funny how quickly you forget that most people in France have never seen gold up close. For them, it's a fantasy, something in fairy tales, or the coin they'll never hold. But for you, it's a daily chore. Not because you own it, not because you're rich, but because someone has to polish it. And at Versailles, that someone is always you. You begin with the doorknobs. Not just any doorknobs. These are shaped like roses, grapes, cherubs, and, in one baffling case, what you think is a dolphin, but might be a deformed lion. Each one needs to be wiped with a soft cloth and buffed with a paste that smells faintly of vinegar and salt. You work in circles. Small, perfect, endless circles. One missed patch and someone will notice. They always notice. The worst are the curtain hooks in the Hall of Mirrors. 70 mirrors line the room, each flanked with gold-gilded sconces, hooks, and fastenings. And every single one is your problem today. You climb the ladder with the care of someone mounting a royal horse. The height isn't dangerous, exactly, but the fall wouldn't be graceful. And at Versailles, grace is everything. As you rub the curved ornament above the third window, your fingers sting. The cloth is coarse, and you've already gone through 2 pairs of gloves this week. There's a blister forming near your thumb, but there's no time to care. You hum a bit under your breath, softly, tunelessly. Not a real song, just a rhythm to keep yourself moving. The mirrored hallway throws your reflection back at you again and again, like it's mocking the fact that you're the only one here, not wearing perfume or powdered hair. You pause to scratch your nose, then immediately regret it. A smudge. You lean closer and see it. A faint print on the lower frame of the nearest mirror. It wasn't you. Probably. Could have been a noble passing through in a rush, trailing powdered sugar or sweat. But it doesn't matter whose it was. You clean it anyway. Then comes the railing on the grand staircase. The one the king uses when he descends with all of court behind him, as if floating on an invisible tide of superiority. Each metal swirl must shine just enough to catch the morning sun, but not so much as to be vulgar. You tried to clarify what that meant once. You were told not to ask again. At this point in the day, the bucket of polish is getting lighter, and your arms are getting heavier. You flex your fingers, trying to keep the numbness from spreading. Behind you, 2 other servants work silently on the baseboards, which are painted to look gold, but only the top layers are real. That's the secret of Versailles. Half the glitter is a lie, but one you're responsible for maintaining. The railing outside the Queen's apartments is the most delicate of all. Little floral curls, less than the width of a finger, and so finely detailed that a single wipe in the wrong direction can bend them out of place. You hold your breath every time you polish them. One wrong move, and you're the reason a royal flower droops. There's also the statue alcoves, the ones tourists will one day stare at for hours. Today, you're crouching before one of them, carefully buffing the gold-plated laurels that wrap around the bust of some Roman general. You forget which one. They all blur together after a while. Chin up, nose sharp, eyes cold. You polish the pedestal, imagining what the statue might say if it could speak. Probably something smug. You head next to the chapel. You always dread the chapel, not because of the religion, but because of the candlesticks. 16 of them, each as tall as your shoulder, cast from solid bronze and gilded so thick they shiver like treasure. They're finicky, always smudged, always dusty. And the priests never notice, until they do. Then it's complaints to the steward, and a long, unpleasant talk about your standard slipping. As you crouch beside one of the altar pillars, you remember a story another servant told you, about the time a visiting duchess leaned against a freshly polished column and stained her gown. The column, of course, was fine. Her gown was not. The servant responsible was dismissed before sunset. They say he's working in a salt mine now. Or was. No one's heard from him in months. Your rag catches on an edge. You tug. The metal bites your skin. Another tear in your glove. You suck the blood from your fingertip. Taste metal and wax. You glance around. No one saw. That's what matters. You've grown good at spotting micro-scratches invisible to the untrained eye. A speck of candle soot from last night's ball. The cloudy film that gathers in corners nobles never notice. You catch it all. And if you miss it, you'll hear about it from someone who's never held a rag in their life. The thing is, none of this gold is yours. Not the doorknobs, or the mirror frames, or the delicate inlays on the music room's harpsichord that you'll polish later today. But you've touched them more than anyone else ever will. You know their shapes better than the nobles do. You know where the gilding is wearing thin, where the dust collects in secret corners, where the Polish pools if you don't wipe fast enough. You once asked what it would cost to own a single mirror frame. The steward laughed and said it cost more than your lifetime's wages. Probably more than your whole family's. You nodded. Of course it did. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to own something like that, not to show off. Just to leave it dirty for a day, just to not clean it, to see it smudged and know you could walk away and no one would care. That kind of freedom is priceless. You pass a noblewoman who scoffs as she notices you wiping a spot near her shoes. She doesn't say thank you. She lifts her skirts a little higher and glides by, the clink of her pearls louder than her voice. You bow out of instinct. Not too deep, just enough to be invisible. A soft bell rings from the west wing. Time to finish here. You gather your rags, your little tin of wax, your tiny brush, and your aching spine. The final item on your checklist is a small golden plaque on a hallway statue, the one of Apollo with the outstretched hand. He's holding the sun. He's always holding the sun. You wipe his knuckles, smile wryly, and mutter, "Must be nice." Then you're gone, down the stairs again, steps quick and practiced. Another servant takes your place in the hallway. She nods at you, already unwrapping her own cloths. The cycle continues. Historians still debate how many servants Versailles actually needed. Some say it was thousands. Others say hundreds did the work of thousands. But none of them ever held this brush, or bent over this banister, or cleaned a candelabra until their hands bled. You have. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. You learn quickly at Versailles that words are dangerous. Not the loud, obvious kind. Those get you punished. It's the quiet ones, the murmurs and glances, that can sink you. So you start listening more than speaking, watching more than reacting. Every hallway has its own ranking system, every gesture a hidden meaning, and you're stuck in the middle of a game with no clear rules and no second chances. Your day begins with the linen list. You're sent to retrieve hand towels from the laundry store, but not for just anyone. These are for Madame Victoire, one of the king's aunts. That means walking through the marble gallery without stepping on the black tiles. Someone once told you that's bad luck, but mostly it's because the scuff marks are too visible there, and the steward watches from the balcony like a hawk in lace cuffs. You carry the folded linens low and to the side, like you were trained, never cradled like a child or a loaf of bread. That looks provincial. And if you look provincial, someone will report you for being unsightly. As you round the corner toward the east wing, a valet brushes past you, not rudely, but fast enough to make it clear you were in his way. You apologize. He doesn't acknowledge you. He's higher ranked. His livery is finer. He speaks to someone who knows someone in the Queen's dressing circle. That makes him something. You? You're just enough of a someone to get in trouble, but never enough to be remembered. That's the strange, slippery thing about Versailles. Even the servants have ranks. The lowest fetch water and coal. Slightly higher ones deliver letters, polish wood, scrub shoes. And above them, those who wear liveries with embroidery, who might get to whisper in a noble's ear during a party. You're not there yet. You might never be. Your gown has no braid. Your cap has no ribbon. But your hands are steady. Your memory is sharp. And you haven't made a mistake since that awful week last summer when you addressed a lady-in-waiting before she spoke to you first. That rule is never written down, but it is sacred. Never speak unless spoken to. Never make eye contact unless invited. Never enter a room with your head higher than a baroness, even by accident. It's a silent system, but every servant knows it. You don't need instructions. You just feel it like a chill behind the neck when someone important walks by. Later, you're delivering a tray of tea to a music rehearsal. A small quartet is practicing in one of the side salons, and a countess lounges nearby, pretending not to judge the pitch of every note. You enter quietly, place the tray down without a sound, and back away. But a small clatter, a spoon shifting against the saucer, makes her head turn. Her gaze lands on you like frost. You curtsy. Too slow. Her lip twitches. You retreat. You don't breathe until the door closes behind you. You find yourself back in the servants' corridor, where no one's watching, except for the others. They're always watching. If you trip, they'll remember. If you cry, they'll whisper. This place doesn't allow weakness. Not in the servant wing, and certainly not near the court. Everyone's trying to climb, but the staircase only has room for so many. Sometimes you're asked to accompany a noble on a short walk to the gardens. Not to speak, not to assist, just to carry a folded shawl in case the weather turns. You walk 2 steps behind, eyes lowered, footsteps light. They speak to one another as if you aren't there. Affairs, debts, gossip about who embarrassed themselves at supper. You hear it all. You remember most of it, but you never repeat it. That would be suicide. Not actual death, of course, but exile to the kitchen scullery is close enough. The footmen tease you occasionally. Nothing cruel, just little tests. They'll ask if you saw what the Marquis was wearing, or what the Queen said at breakfast. If you answer, they laugh. If you don't, they smile knowingly. Either way, they remember. It's a game, and you've learned not to play it. Once, a younger girl tried to joke with a noble's hairdresser while waiting in the hallway. Just a joke. A simple comment about powdered wigs and the size of foreheads. Word reached the steward. She was reassigned to chamber pot duty before dusk. Her laughter didn't last long after that. Still, there are moments, tiny ones, when someone sees you. An older maid who nods in approval after you smooth a bed cover just right. A passing valet who subtly shifts to let you walk ahead, just once. Those moments don't mean promotion, but they mean survival. You cling to them in the back of your mind, saving them like imaginary coins in an invisible purse. One morning, while helping arrange perfume bottles in the Queen's outer chambers, you accidentally brush a bottle with your sleeve. It wobbles. You freeze, but a quick-thinking lady's maid steadies it before it falls. She says nothing. You say nothing, but the look she gives you, brief, serious, and strangely kind, says everything. That's how allies are made here. Quietly, carefully, invisibly. It's not just the nobles who judge you. It's the stewards, the ushers, even the other maids. Everyone wants to stay where they are, or climb one rung higher. No one wants to fall. So you learn to move like smoke, drifting, lingering just long enough to do your job, then gone again before anyone has the chance to point fingers. There's an etiquette even among silence. How to wait by a doorway without appearing to listen. How to carry gossip without reacting to it. How to smile just enough to look pleasant, but not enough to be accused of mocking someone above you. You've learned the perfect distance to stand behind a noblewoman while she reads. You know when to curtsy with the left foot forward versus the right. You've memorized dozens of names you'll never say aloud, simply because recognizing them could mean the difference between favor and disgrace. Historians still wonder how such a rigid system functioned for so long. How a palace full of egos and ambition didn't collapse under the weight of its own absurdity. But you know the answer. It's because of fear. Not the kind that shows, but the quiet kind. The fear of slipping, of stepping out of line, of being noticed for the wrong thing. Because here at Versailles, to be noticed is to be measured. And to be measured is to be found lacking. You've made it this far by watching, waiting, learning. Not climbing, just staying still. Still is safe. Still is silent. And in a place where everything sparkles too loudly, silence is the only shield you have. There's a peculiar gift that every long-term servant at Versailles acquires. It isn't balancing silver trays, or folding chemises into perfect thirds, or even slipping through a ballroom without rustling the drapes. No, the real skill is listening, quietly, invisibly, collecting conversations like lint in your apron pocket. You don't mean to hear them, not at first. But the walls at Versailles are thin, and the mouths within them are loose. Nobles speak as if privacy is a birthright, as if servants are marble statues that just happen to move around, dust in hand, ears conveniently deaf. You overhear things constantly. Walking past a cracked door, delivering a tray, brushing ash from a fireplace. You learn that Madame de Clermont owes 12,000 livres to 3 different people, and has no intention of paying any of them. You learn that the Duc de Boufflers is secretly allergic to strawberries, but pretends not to be, because he thinks it makes him seem less aristocratic. You once overheard a marquis mutter that he hated the king's taste in carpets. He said it like a joke, but it landed like a challenge. Everyone in the room went silent. The sound of tension, you found, is much louder than laughter. In the morning, you help a maid carry fresh linens to the Dauphin's rooms. She's half awake, humming a waltz under her breath, when you both pass by a private salon door, barely cracked, barely noticeable. Inside, a voice, low, sharp, unmistakably noble. If the Austrian girl steps out of line again, I'll have no choice but to embarrass her publicly. You both freeze. The Austrian girl can only mean Marie Antoinette. You don't see who says it. You don't need to. The voice has weight. Whoever it is, they have the ear of someone powerful. You keep walking. Fast. The humming stops. That's the other rule. If you hear something, you didn't. If you repeat something, you're gone. Versailles has no room for chatty servants. Gossip flows in the open, but never from your mouth. It's a performance, and your role is to be the scenery. Still, you remember everything. How can you not? Some whispers are impossible to forget. You once entered the West Library to clean a candelabra and found a countess crying quietly behind a bookshelf. She was holding a letter and shaking hands. You didn't mean to look, but you caught the words, "No dowry, no match." She folded it, composed herself in one long inhale, and turned to you with a smile so crisp you wondered if it had been stitched into her skin. "Not a word," she said. You nodded. She gave you a coin. You never spent it. Another day, you were gathering crumbs from the parlor chairs after an afternoon game of cards when you heard muffled laughter coming from behind the wall panel. You didn't even know it was a hidden passage until that moment. A door creaked slightly ajar, just enough to see shadows moving, two figures, too close. A man and a woman, locked in a slow dance of whispers and giggles. One of them was supposed to be elsewhere, publicly elsewhere. You crept away as quietly as you could, heart pounding, ears burning. You've seen both of them since, smiling at one another across a ballroom like nothing had ever happened. There's a drawer in the steward's office with complaint letters. You know because you've helped dust it. One letter, unsigned, claimed that a duke's valet was too familiar with the queen's shoe maid. The valet vanished a week later. The shoe maid was reassigned to a minor duchess in Brittany. Everyone pretended not to know why. Sometimes you overhear things that make your stomach tighten. Words that float in the air and leave behind a chill. Late at night, near the Hall of Battles, you once passed a pair of officers whispering about arming the servants first. You didn't understand what they meant. Maybe a joke, maybe not. But the way they looked over their shoulders, twice, told you it wasn't something to be repeated. You kept walking, pretending you hadn't heard. You pretended so well, you almost believed it yourself. You've heard the queen cry, not sobbing, just a slow, leaking silence behind a closed door in the Petit Trianon. The sound of a woman who isn't allowed to be seen crumbling. A lady's maid rushed you away before you could linger. "She's tired," she said. You nodded and said nothing. You wonder if she even knew you were standing there. Historians love to talk about the big revolutions, the declarations, the turning points. But you hear the prelude, the quiet unraveling. You hear nobles argue over debts. You hear chambermaids sigh about bread prices. You hear valets wonder out loud whether the Swiss guards would stay loyal if things got complicated. No one says revolution, not yet, but you can hear it approaching in the way people lower their voices at the mention of taxes. And sometimes you overhear things that are just absurd. Like the time you heard a baron tell his mistress that he'd write a poem comparing her to Versailles itself, opulent, distant, and impossible to clean. You nearly dropped the tray. Another time, a teenage noble insisted he'd invented a new way to bow that would revolutionize diplomacy. You watched him test it later. He fell over. But even laughter must be stored carefully. You can't laugh out loud, not unless they invite you to, which they never do. Instead, you collect the jokes in your head, turning them over quietly when the days stretch long and the polish makes your hands sting. Once, a steward asked you directly, "Did you hear anything strange outside the council room today?" You paused, blinked. "Only the wind," you said. He nodded once. You were dismissed. That was a test. And you passed. Not all secrets come from the mouths of nobles. You hear the servants too. Whispers in the laundry wing. Rumors in the scullery. Someone says the baker's assistant went missing. Someone else saw a man being escorted out in the night, pale as a ghost. No one knows what happened. Or they do, and they're not saying. You don't trust the echoes in the palace. Sometimes you hear your own name when no one's around. Maybe you're imagining it, or maybe someone's talking. You hope, quietly, that it's the first. There's a reason so many noble secrets stay buried for centuries. They weren't hidden. They were just never written down. They floated in the palace air, in the spaces between rooms, in the brief, private moments servants weren't meant to witness, but always did. The palace hears everything, and so do you. You just never say it out loud. The day ends like it always does. Not with a grand finale, but with a slow unraveling. The bells toll from somewhere far off, marking a time that only matters to people with the luxury to ignore it. For you, time is not marked by hours, but by the weight in your limbs. You feel it now, pressing down on your shoulders as you climb the narrow stairwell that leads to your sleeping quarters, a space so cramped it doesn't echo, only exhales. The heat of the palace never reaches here. You can see your breath most nights, even in spring. You crawl beneath a blanket that was once white and is now the soft brown of overuse. The straw inside it shifts with your weight, poking in odd places, but you've grown used to it. You lie on your back and let your bones settle. Your feet ache. Your arms feel hollow. Your mind does not stop. Across from you, someone is already snoring. One bunk over, a girl mumbles in her sleep, something about cream puffs and broken dishes. You smile faintly. You know exactly what she's dreaming about. Even in rest, the job follows you. Your dreams have gold frames and velvet hallways. They smell like melted wax and boiled starch. Sometimes, in your sleep, you find yourself scrubbing the floor. And in those dreams, you're still doing it wrong. The ceiling above you is made of wooden beams, low and splintered. If you stretch your hand out in the dark, you can touch them. Sometimes you do, just to remind yourself that you're real, that you're here, that you exist in this place, even if no one says your name. You think of the rooms below you, vast halls glowing with candlelight, where wine flows freely and laughter bounces off the gold. You were there earlier, unseen, clearing empty glasses, scooping crumbs from silk carpets. No one made eye contact. No one asked your opinion on anything. But you were there. And now, as the party rolls on beneath your floorboards, you lie still and listen to the muffled thud of music and the faint giggles of the nobility. It's strange how something so beautiful from a distance can feel so crushing when it's overhead. Versailles weighs more at night. The walls feel heavier. The air smells sharper. The silence, when it comes, is the kind that hums. You close your eyes and try to picture a life beyond this. A small cottage, a bit of land, clean linens that belong to you, a door that locks, a morning where someone else carries the bucket. You don't imagine riches, just a softer pillow, a name spoken kindly, a morning without bruises in your knees from polishing baseboards. The other girls sleep beside you, their faces turned to the wall. Someone sighs, someone coughs. A foot kicks against the wood frame. All of you are dreaming variations of the same dream. Escape, not in revolution, not in fire, just in freedom. Quiet, invisible freedom. There are stories. Ones the older servants whisper, late at night, when everyone's too tired to pretend they're strong. About girls who ran off and became dressmakers, or married a merchant and never looked back, or disappeared into Paris and wrote books under false names. Stories that taste like honey and sound like lies, but you cling to them anyway. Sometimes lies are the only soft thing you get. A mouse skitters along the rafter above you. It pauses, sniffs, disappears again. You think you hear it chewing in the wall. The castle has mice, just like it has cracks and drafts and secrets. For all its gold, Versailles is still made of wood and stone. You remind yourself of that when it feels too big, too untouchable. Your eyes grow heavy. You picture the chandelier in the salon, the one you dusted this morning, 26 candles high. You wonder if any of them burned all the way down. If wax dripped onto the carpet. If someone will blame you. Probably. You'll find out tomorrow. And yet, beneath all that exhaustion, there's still something else. A strange sense of power. Not the kind the nobility carry in their names, but the quiet kind. You know this place better than any of them. You've seen its secrets, cleaned its lies, watched it flinch and falter. You've been its eyes, its hands, its shadow. And while they dream above silk sheets, you dream beneath beams of splintered pine, and you still rise. You begin to drift, your thoughts softening into clouds. Someone shifts beside you. The music fades below. Sleep comes like warm cloth pressed to your forehead. Gentle, heavy, welcome. But far away, in a distant part of the palace, something else stirs. Wheels creak in the dark. Leather boots click against stone. A heavy carriage waits beneath a blanket of stars, cloaked in secrecy. A king, not yet stripped of his power, steps into the night in disguise. And you, though not yet aware of it, are about to become part of a moment that will change history. Because in just a few hours, the king will run, and France will never be the same. You're pulled from sleep by a hand on your shoulder and a voice that doesn't belong to anyone you know. It's low, urgent, and oddly calm. Get up, no questions. There's something in the tone that silences any resistance before it starts. You don't speak. You just swing your feet over the side of the cot, press them into the freezing floor, and dress as quickly as your shaking hands allow. The hallway is darker than usual. No candlelight, no chatter, just the sound of boots on stone. You follow your guide without being told. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't explain why you, of all people, have been summoned. Only that you are to carry something. Quietly, carefully, and forget what you see. You pass familiar corners of the palace that feel unfamiliar now. The grand staircase looms in the dark, its polished railings dulled by night. You're led through servant passages that curve behind the state apartments, into narrow halls that smell of damp stone and old starch. There's no laughter, no perfume, just cold air and unspoken urgency. You emerge into a small courtyard, lit only by a quarter moon. A large, covered carriage waits under a canopy of stars, its wheels shrouded in cloth to muffle the sound. 2 horses shift restlessly in their traces. Someone adjusts a harness, whispering soothing nonsense into a mare's ear. You've seen many carriages in your time here. This one is trying too hard not to be noticed, which makes it impossible to ignore. You glance up and see a man in a long brown coat and a tricorn hat. He's giving orders softly, measured, deliberate. At first, you don't recognize him. He looks heavier than the man you've seen every morning at the lever, less polished. But the voice is unmistakable. Even with the powdered wig gone and the frills stripped away, it's the king. Your mouth goes dry. You stare at your feet, pretending you saw nothing, heard nothing, know nothing. The very air feels fragile now, like one misstep could crack open the whole sky. You're handed a satchel. It's heavier than expected. Coins, maybe, letters, maybe something more dangerous. You don't ask. You climb into the rear compartment of the carriage and tuck the bag beneath one of the velvet-covered benches. There are pillows embroidered with family crests, too fine for the merchant family they're pretending to be. You wonder who packed them. From the corner of your eye, you spot the queen. Her face is shadowed beneath a dark bonnet, but her posture gives her away. Ramrod straight, jaw set like stone. She clutches a fan that has no use in this chill. It's not meant for cooling, it's armor. Her children sit beside her, silent, wide-eyed, dressed like peasant boys with clean hands. The door closes with a soft click, and the world seems to hush. A footman you don't recognize takes the reins. He clicks his tongue, and the carriage begins to roll forward. Slowly, smoothly, like this is nothing more than a nighttime stroll. You're told to walk beside it for a few minutes, just until the carriage reaches the tree line. It's a performance, a role. You play it well. Your footsteps crunch on the gravel path. You force your face into neutrality, the way you do when nobles pass in the halls, and you become part of the wallpaper. But your heart drums like a warning bell. The king is fleeing his own palace. The queen is wrapped in shadows. And Versailles, a shining jewel of France, has just quietly unhooked its crown and slipped it into a disguise. You glance at the driver, wondering what he's been promised. A title, a ship, or just enough gold to vanish forever. The gates open without resistance. Not the front gates, of course. The side entrance, the one used for deliveries and discretion. A lone guard stands watch, pretending to check something on a clipboard. His face doesn't change as the carriage rolls past. You see his fingers trembling at his side. As the carriage disappears into the forest road beyond the palace walls, You stop walking. You've done what was asked. The man who led you here gives no thanks, only a short nod and a reminder to return the way you came. You never saw this, he mutters. You never heard a thing. You nod once and walk away, heart pounding. Back in the servants' corridor, everything is quiet. Not calm, just quiet. You move past sleeping figures, their faces softened by exhaustion. None of them know that the king is already halfway to the next town, that he's in a brown coat instead of royal blue, that he's planning to reach the border, to meet loyal troops, to reclaim control before the tide turns against him completely. You lie down again, still in your uniform, your pulse too loud to ignore. Above you, the beams creak. Below you, the palace continues to breathe, slower now, quieter, but still unaware. You press your eyes shut and try to forget what you've seen. Try to unsee the queen's hand clutching the carriage door, the way her son looked up at the stars and didn't blink. But sleep won't come. Not now. The images replay again and again, like scenes from a silent play that only you attended. You begin to wonder what will happen if they make it. If the king succeeds, will he return to Versailles? Will he remember who held the satchel? Or what if he fails? A chill brushes the back of your neck, as if history has opened a door just behind you. You roll onto your side, pull the blanket up to your chin, and try not to think about the future. You are a servant. You are not supposed to worry about kings and queens and treason. But tonight, you walked beside a fleeing monarch. And even if you never speak of it, the truth now lives inside you like a secret flame. The bells will ring soon. Another day will begin. But this day, this quiet moonlit sliver of night, will live forever in your memory. You were there. You saw the mask slip, and even in your silence, you became part of something that cannot be undone. The road is not as smooth as it was promised to be. You sit inside the rear compartment of the carriage, pressed between travel trunks and the faint scent of rosewater, listening to every creak and groan the wheels produce as they strain over dirt and stone. The woods that flanked either side of the road seem to press closer with every mile, as though the trees themselves are conspiring to trap you here. The moon filters through the branches in thin silver ribbons, but it does little to light the way. It only sharpens the shadows. You've never been this far from the palace before. Versailles was your whole world, stone corridors and echoing footsteps, whispered rules and gilded lies. Out here, the rules are different, quieter, more dangerous. You glance out the tiny window of the coach, half expecting to see someone following, half hoping not to. Inside the carriage, it's stifling. The air is heavy with silence. No one speaks unless absolutely necessary, and even then, only in whispers. The queen's face is pale and tight, her hands folded in her lap, white-knuckled. She stares out the opposite window, but you can tell she's not seeing anything at all. The king keeps shifting in his seat, his bulk making the cushions groan beneath him. His disguise, a brown coat, plain breeches, shoes with dirt rubbed into the leather, can't quite hide the way he holds himself. He keeps forgetting to slouch. He tries to make small talk with one of the guards dressed as a coachman, something about the weight of the luggage, or the condition of the road. It's the sort of conversation a man of his supposed class would never initiate. The coachman nods and answers in short syllables, eyes flicking to the trees every few seconds. You get the feeling he's not listening to the king's words so much as watching the dark. The wheels hit a rut in the path, and the whole carriage lurches. The youngest child, barely more than a toddler, lets out a small whimper. The queen hushes him with a touch, but her fingers tremble. You notice that even in disguise, even in the middle of a flight from the law, her sleeves are trimmed with lace. Old habits die slowly. Every sound outside feels amplified. The hoot of an owl becomes a trumpet. A snapping twig could be a musket cocking. The forest is too quiet in places, and then too loud in others. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls, thin and ragged. The driver doesn't flinch, but you see his shoulders tense. A small oil lantern swings from the hook in the center of the carriage ceiling. It throws golden light against the faces around you, making their disguises feel even more absurd. These aren't villagers. These aren't tutors or governesses. These are the royal family of France, and no amount of soot or simple linen can undo what you know in your bones. The king tries to shift his weight again, but the seat beneath him creaks loudly. Everyone freezes. The coachman slows the horses for a moment, then resumes the pace. No one speaks of it, but now you all hear it with each movement. The wheels, the axles, the slow grind of wood under pressure. The sounds of motion that feel, in this moment, like a confession. You lean slightly against the side wall, letting the rhythm of the road lull your body while your mind refuses to follow. You try to ignore how loud your own breathing sounds, how obvious it feels. The coach hits another bump, and something under the bench clinks, a coin purse, or maybe a buckle. The queen glances at you, not sharply, just long enough to register your presence. Her mouth opens slightly, then closes. She doesn't speak. She hasn't spoken to anyone since the gates closed behind you. You realize she probably has nothing to say that won't sound foolish now. There are no polite phrases for this situation. You wonder if she's remembering Versailles, the way the walls echoed with laughter during masquerade balls, the way people bowed to her like a goddess wrapped in silk. Now she's draped in dull wool, riding in a plain carriage through a forest that smells of wet bark and fear. One of the horses snorts, and the driver murmurs something low in response. You can't hear the words. You doubt they matter. The horses are the only ones here who don't understand what's at stake. The road turns sharply. The coach leans just enough to make everyone inside sway. The king mutters something about needing to rest the horses at the next town. The governess, really the Marquise de Tourzel, gives him a look. It's brief but loaded. There is no next town. There are checkpoints, soldiers, curious eyes, too many names on too many lists. Brest is not on the itinerary. Historians still wonder why the king insisted on traveling in such a large, luxurious coach. Why not take a small, unremarkable cart? Why not ride separately, disguised more convincingly? But sitting here, watching him awkwardly adjust his belt and ask how many hours remain, you understand. He didn't believe he could be caught. Not really. Power, once worn long enough, starts to feel like armor, even when it's just air. A sharp crack splits the night, a branch breaking under weight. The driver pulls back on the reins. You all go still. The queen clutches her child's shoulder. The king squints through the window. Nothing. Just shadows shifting in the underbrush. A rabbit, maybe, or a spy. Or the revolution itself, wearing patience like a cloak. The moment passes. The driver mutters more to himself than anyone else, and the carriage resumes its slow, relentless crawl through the trees. No one breathes for a full minute. Eventually, the trees thin. You see the faint glow of torchlight in the distance. A town, sleepy, unsuspecting. Maybe safe, maybe not. You wipe your hands on your skirt and brace yourself. The creaking wheels groan again. They know, even if no one else does. The monarchy is not built for escape. Every inch of this road carries the weight of denial. And the forest, silent once more, swallows the carriage whole as it moves toward whatever comes next. The carriage rolls into Saint-Menhold just as the sun begins to slip behind the rooftops, casting the town in that warm, deceptive glow that makes even suspicion look picturesque. From a distance, it seems like any small French town. Cobbled streets, crooked chimneys, the scent of baking bread drifting on the breeze. But the closer you get, the more watchful it feels. Windows are open, but curtains twitch. A child chasing a hoop slows to a stop to stare. The blacksmith's hammer pauses in midair. It's subtle, but you feel it. The town is already aware of you. The driver reins in the horses in front of the posting inn, and before the coach has even come to a full stop, the innkeeper is already outside. He's wiping his hands on his apron, putting on the kind of smile that's polite enough to be suspicious. The king, still buried under the plain brown coat of his false identity, doesn't meet anyone's eyes. Neither does the queen. She keeps her gaze trained on her lap, jaw clenched, fingers tight around the edge of her sleeve. Her son fidgets beside her, but a gentle hand on his shoulder brings him back into stillness. You descend first, carrying a parcel that's supposed to contain linens. It doesn't. You're not sure what's in it, but it's heavy. And the way it was passed to you with no explanation tells you not to ask. You try to look bored, like someone running a tedious errand, while your heart beats like a drum in your ears. The innkeeper's eyes flick from you to the king, who steps down from the coach with all the stiffness of someone trying to remember how to act poor. Then you see him. Standing across the square, arms folded over his vest, is the local postmaster, Jean-Baptiste Drout. He's not moving, just watching. He's a big man, with a thick neck and eyes that narrow the moment he sees the group disembarking. He doesn't squint like someone trying to see better. He squints like someone trying to remember. The horses are being changed. Fresh ones are let out from the stable, hooves echoing sharply against the stones. The driver mumbles something about the delay, but no one really listens. Drout crosses the square, not fast, not slow, just steadily. The way a man walks when he's already made up his mind. He begins with questions. Polite, curious, offhanded. Where are you traveling from? Heading to Varennes, are you? With children? So late in the day? His tone is casual, but his eyes are focused. He isn't asking out of hospitality. He's measuring your answers. The governess, really the Marquise de Tourzel, in an unflattering shawl, smiles thinly and answers with a rehearsed ease. She speaks of visiting family, of travel delays, of a sick uncle who lives somewhere no one's ever heard of. Her voice lilts just enough to sound forgettable. But the king, standing nearby, doesn't speak at all. That's the first mistake. Royal silence, when wrapped in velvet, reads as dignity. But when paired with common clothes and forced humility, it looks like guilt. The king shifts his weight from one foot to the other, uncomfortable. Not from the boots, which are too tight, but from the pressure building in the air. Then comes the second mistake. A coin changes hands. Too much money for too small a service. It gleams in the evening light, heavy and unmistakably royal. Drout's eyes flick down to it, then up again, slowly, precisely. His expression doesn't change, but something inside him does. You see it in the way his head tilts just slightly, the way his eyes narrow another fraction of an inch. He stares at the king's face, not with deference, with recognition. Not quite certainty, but close, and you know the exact moment the balance tips. Drout doesn't say anything. He just steps back, folds his arms again, and watches. He lets the transaction finish. He doesn't stop the horses. He doesn't alert the guard. But his eyes don't leave the carriage for a second. Inside the coach, the queen pretends to adjust her son's collar. Her hand trembles. The child, sensing the tension, pulls away slightly, confused but silent. The king exhales through his nose, still refusing to look back at the postmaster. You sit in your corner, watching from behind the curtain, heart pounding in your throat. They thought they had planned everything. The route, the disguises, the false names, the quiet departure. But they forgot something crucial. Faces are harder to disguise than clothes. Voices carry further than footsteps. And suspicion, once awakened, spreads faster than any carriage. The driver clicks his tongue, and the coach pulls away. The wheels bump against the uneven road, the fresh horses breathing heavily. You glance back through the dust cloud. Drout hasn't moved. He stands in the same spot, hands now at his sides, staring after the retreating carriage as if it might vanish. As if, in his gut, he knows exactly who he just saw, but can't quite believe it. Inside the coach, no one speaks. The lantern swings slightly overhead, casting shadows across pale faces. The king shifts again. The queen closes her eyes, lips pressed into a line. The marquise's fingers fidget in her lap. You sit as still as you can, not out of discipline, but fear. Eventually, the silence breaks. He recognized me, the king mutters. No one contradicts him. No one tries to reassure. They all know it's true. Historians have puzzled over why Droot didn't stop the coach right then and there. Maybe he didn't want to act without proof. Maybe he wanted help. Or maybe, deep down, he wanted to be the one who confirmed the greatest scandal in French history. Whatever the reason, you can feel the danger trailing behind you now, like a second shadow. You pass through the next village quickly, not stopping unless absolutely necessary. The king fidgets more. The queen stares out the window. The children drift into uneasy sleep. The road stretches on, endless and slow. And somewhere, not far behind, a man is saddling a horse with grim purpose. You don't know it yet, but Droot is already writing letters. Already sending word ahead. Already riding hard toward Varennes. The trap isn't closing. It's already closed. You're just still moving inside it. You arrive in Varennes well past midnight, after what feels like an eternity of listening to the same wheels groan beneath the coach. The road had narrowed, turned rocky, then opened again. The night air is thick with the scent of horses, pine, and something sour, uncertainty, maybe. Everyone is exhausted. The children are slumped against each other, like warm laundry, barely conscious. The queen hasn't spoken in over an hour. The king keeps checking the window, as if hoping to see something familiar. He doesn't. From the outside, Varennes is little more than a crooked collection of rooftops, tucked along a riverbank. Sleepy, quiet, forgettable, which is exactly what it was supposed to be. The perfect place to pass through unnoticed on the final leg of the journey to safety. You expect peace, you expect night. Instead, you see torches. Too many torches. The coach slows. The horses sense it too, ears twitching, muscles tense. The driver leans forward, squinting into the dark. Figures move up ahead. Not many at first. Just a few townsfolk holding lanterns, blinking in the yellow light. But more appear behind them, shadows becoming shapes, then men with muskets, and others in civic uniforms. They're not speaking. They're waiting. Something is wrong. The king leans forward, trying to look past the driver. The queen shifts her weight, hand resting on her son's knee. You hear it in her breath. A change. She already knows. There's no safe passage here. You've been found. A man steps forward from the crowd. You recognize him immediately. Jean-Baptiste Droot. His shirt is soaked with sweat, his boots caked in mud, but his eyes are burning with certainty. He's holding a paper, a pamphlet. The king's face printed on it, side by side with words like traitor and deserter. He doesn't wave it. He just looks at the man in the coach, then holds it next to his face. The resemblance is no longer subtle. The driver starts to say something, to bluff, maybe, but a voice cuts through the air. You are under arrest. It's a phrase that doesn't belong in this setting. It sounds ridiculous, almost theatrical. How can a king be arrested in a provincial town square by a postmaster? And yet, it happens. The coach is surrounded. Not with military force, but with certainty. With people who have seen too much, read too much, been hungry too long. Men with hunting rifles. Boys with pitchforks. Women whispering prayers and curses under their breath. The king steps down slowly. His foot catches on the doorframe, just slightly. It's the kind of misstep that wouldn't matter if he were wearing robes and a crown. But in this borrowed coat, It's humiliating. The queen follows, holding her son's hand. The marquise follows her. No one gives orders. There's no guard to clear a path. Just the crush of silence. Someone asks for identification. The king hesitates. A man, not from the original crowd, steps forward. A local official, sober-faced, holding a lantern. He demands their papers. The marquise produces them, explaining their cover story again. They are a governess, a tutor, a traveling family. But the official doesn't blink. "You are Louis Capet," he says to the king. It's not a question. The air stills. No one breathes. The king, to his credit, doesn't deny it. He simply nods once, heavily, and lowers his gaze. The moment is strange, almost gentle, like watching someone surrender not to force, but to inevitability. The queen stiffens. She looks at the townspeople, not in fear, not exactly, but in something colder. Contempt? Grief? You can't quite tell. She opens her mouth, but the king places a hand on her arm. She closes it again. You're told to step back, to remain by the carriage. You do. You are, once again, the shadow in the room. You watch as the royal family is escorted into the nearby inn. A second-floor room, a plain table, 4 mismatched chairs. It could belong to anyone. But tonight, it becomes the site of the French monarchy's undoing. The hours that follow are thick with negotiations, threats, and silence. Riders are sent. Orders arrive. Paris is informed. Lafayette's name is spoken more than once. The king tries to argue. The queen doesn't. She just watches. You glimpse her once through the inn window, her profile lit by candlelight. She's no longer pretending. She looks like a woman who has seen the future and knows she is not in it. By dawn, the verdict is clear. They will be taken back. You're still there when the guards arrive. They're not royal soldiers, but National Guardsmen from local posts. Ordinary men in mismatched uniforms. They treat the king like a prisoner. They call him Monsieur. They don't bow. You help carry bags back to the coach, hands numb, throat dry. No one thanks you. That part of the illusion is long gone. Before the king steps back into the carriage, he turns to look at the crowd. His face is pale, his eyes unreadable. Not defiant, not broken, just hollow. The queen follows without a word. The children are lifted in. Then the doors shut, and the coach that once carried hope now carries consequence. As the wheels begin to turn again, the townspeople don't cheer. They just watch. A few remove their hats. A few spit on the road. You stand there, stiff and silent, watching history roll away. You've been part of something monumental, and yet you're still wearing the same shoes. Still hungry. Still forgotten. Historians would later call it the moment the monarchy truly died. Not with guillotines, not with speeches, but here, in a small town, beneath a gray sky, where a king was mistaken for a common man, and no one cared to correct it. The carriage creaks forward, but the mood inside has changed. The horses are the same, the roads the same, but the silence is heavier now, thicker than velvet. You're sitting in the same corner, staring at the same floorboards, but it feels like someone has turned down the air itself. There's no anticipation anymore, only the slow, cold weight of consequence. The king sits with his hands folded in his lap. He stopped pretending to be anyone else. The posture is still royal, but the confidence has drained away. His coat is buttoned poorly, as if he stopped halfway through and forgot what came next. The queen sits beside him, eyes fixed on the far window, her son asleep in her lap. She doesn't stroke his hair or murmur reassurances. She's too still for that. She's conserving herself, like someone who's lost too much water and has decided to stop sweating. The carriage doesn't take the most direct road back to Paris. Too many angry crowds. Too many rumors flying ahead of you like crows. The National Guards escorting the royal family detour through smaller towns and open country, hoping to avoid mobs, but it doesn't work. At every stop, the crowds are there. They don't cheer. They don't cry. They just stare. You see it through the curtains. Farmers with arms crossed, children perched on fences, old men who don't bother removing their hats. A few shout things you'd rather not translate. One woman throws a cabbage. It misses, barely. The queen doesn't flinch. Inside the coach, no one speaks unless they must. The air is so quiet you can hear every jolt of the wheels, every uneven stone underfoot. At one point, the king begins to mutter something about how the escape could have worked if the horses had been faster, if Droot had hesitated longer, if someone had recognized him in time and cleared the way. His voice trails off before anyone responds. No one will tell him the truth. The plan was never clever enough, and the disguise was never good enough. He looked too royal, even when he tried not to. You stop in one town where the mayor insists on serving them a meal. The table is bare, the chairs mismatched. The food is cold and simple. You pour wine into chipped clay cups that smell of vinegar. The king thanks no one. The queen doesn't touch her plate. The child eats quietly. You wish someone would say something human, something small and normal. But the room stays stiff, like a play no one wants to perform anymore. Back on the road, you ride with the second cart, closer to the guards now. There are more of them with each passing day. Word is spreading. Newspapers have caught wind of the arrest. Some say the king has abdicated. Others claim he was kidnapped. One paper calls it divine punishment. Another simply prints his face with the caption, "Found." You pass by villages you've never seen before, places so quiet they barely register on a map. Yet even there, people stand waiting. One boy holds a small wooden sword and points it at the carriage as you pass. His father doesn't stop him. The queen notices. For the first time in hours, she speaks. "Children learn quickly," she says. Her voice is soft, not bitter, but you can't help feeling the weight in it, like she knows her son may never sit on a throne, but will grow up in the shadow of one that crumbled. The king begins asking questions again. How far to the next stop? When he'll be permitted to write letters? Whether the assembly has sent word? No one answers. The guards have orders, but they don't share them. They address him as Monsieur, never Your Majesty. That title has been left behind in Varennes. At night, you sleep in a barn behind the inn, or the royal family is confined upstairs. You're not given a bed, just a pile of straw and a blanket that smells like old potatoes. But you're grateful for it. The guards sleep with one eye open, muskets close at hand. They're not just protecting the king anymore. They're protecting themselves from the crowd that might want to tear him apart. The queen requests more water for washing. She still insists on being clean, even if everything else is falling apart. You carry up the bucket and place it at her feet without a word. She looks at you once, just once, and for the first time, her eyes seem to plead. Not for rescue, not for pity, just for understanding. You nod, though you're not sure why. Maybe just to let her know she's still visible. By the fifth day, the mood shifts. Paris looms ahead, its spires just visible on the horizon. The sky is gray, the kind of thick, sour gray that makes the city feel like it's sweating, even when it isn't hot. You pass by road signs now marked with slogans. Liberté, Eaglite, Fraternit. One has been smeared with something dark. Maybe mud, maybe not. You ask one of the guards what the plan is. He shrugs. March them in. Let the people see, he says. They want proof. His tone isn't cruel, just resigned. You ride the last mile in silence. The crowd thickens long before you reach the city gates. They're not shouting. They're not singing. They're waiting, watching, like spectators at a show whose ending they already know. The king leans forward slightly, peeking through the curtain. "It's changed," he says, as if surprised. But Paris didn't change. Only his view of it did. The gates open, and history moves forward, wheel by reluctant wheel. The carriage enters Paris to a silence more terrifying than any riot. There are no trumpets, no shouts of welcome or condemnation, just faces. Thousands of them, lined up along the streets, packed behind wooden barricades, leaning out of windows, standing on crates. Some cross their arms, some cover their mouths. Most just stare. You've never seen so many people say so much without speaking. Their eyes burn with questions, some angry, some stunned, some hollow. You try not to look, but it's impossible not to. The crowd doesn't feel like a mob, not yet. But it doesn't feel like citizens either. It feels like a verdict, waiting to be spoken aloud. The guards don't rush. The horses plod forward, their hooves clacking against the cobbles like a ticking clock. You sit stiff-backed in the rear coach, barely able to breathe. There are whispers. You hear them, soft and pointed. That's him. He ran. They caught him. You keep your head down, but you can feel the weight of the city pressing in. The carriage turns the final corner and slows in front of the Tuileries Palace. An unfamiliar prison wearing the costume of a home. The gardens are empty. The fountains have been shut off. The birds have gone quiet. You step down first, boots landing on stone that still remembers ceremony, but now knows only shame. The king exits next. He doesn't stumble this time. He steps onto the stones like someone who has accepted something irreversible. The crowd surges forward, not to attack, but to see, just to confirm. He looks around, jaw tight, and gives the slightest nod, as though greeting an invisible court. No one bows. That age is over. Inside, the Tuileries is colder than Versailles ever was. Less gold, less laughter, no ceremony. The king's chambers are plain and dim. The queen's quarters are modest and locked at night. Guards patrol the hallways constantly, not for show, but for control. You unpack their belongings under watchful eyes. Every comb, every boot, every strip of ribbon is inspected. One servant whispers that even their letters are opened, now before they can read them. The king tries to keep routine. He dresses each morning. He requests briefings. He writes notes in the margins of newspapers, as if still capable of steering the ship from the brig. But no one listens. The National Assembly has taken over the wheel. The throne still exists in name, but no one sitting on it. Each hour, something else slips away. One morning, the royal seal is removed from a stack of documents. Another day, his meals arrive cold. A valet is reassigned without warning. And still the king pretends. That's the strangest part. He clings to formality like it's armor, as if saying, "Your Majesty, one more time might make it true again." The queen, meanwhile, folds into silence. She speaks only to her children. She no longer scolds. She no longer smiles. When she writes, it's on scraps of paper she hides in her shoe. You find one by accident while organizing a trunk. You don't read it. You couldn't if you tried. Her writing has grown so small and crooked, it's barely legible. But you hold the paper like it's warm, alive, like it knows too much. One night, as you pass the hallway outside their rooms, you hear the king's voice through the door. He's reading aloud to his son. His tone is steady, soft. A fairy tale. Something about a lost traveler and a kingdom that forgot itself. The child doesn't respond. Maybe he's already asleep. Maybe he's just pretending. Outside, the assembly debates. Inside, the monarchy decays in slow motion. People bring food, clothes, petitions. Some come to glare, some come to cry. But mostly, the palace becomes a quiet stage. A place where a royal family sits in costume, playing out a part that no longer matters. You still serve them. You still clean their floors and brush their coats and pour their water. But the meaning has changed. You're not attending rulers now. You're preserving relics. Historians say the monarchy died at the guillotine, but you know better. It died here, in the long hours between arrest and punishment, in the cold mornings, in the meals eaten in silence, in the way the queen stares out the window like she's already gone. The blade was just punctuation. And so, when you finally returned to Versailles, weeks later to help prepare a set of rooms for visiting deputies, it's like stepping into a ghost. The mirrors still gleam. The chandeliers still hang. But the air has changed. Something sacred is missing, and no one dares name it. The palace is quiet, not just from emptiness, but from the kind of silence that comes after shouting. A place too stunned to speak. But even now, even in this stillness, there are corners of the palace that remember everything. Behind the walls, inside the secret panels, hidden staircases still wind their way through forgotten places. Passageways used for escape, for secrets, for sins. Passageways that watched it all happen. And in those spaces, the palace breathes differently. Because in the shadows, history doesn't sleep. It waits. You wouldn't notice it, not unless you were looking for it. And even then, you'd have to be very, very quiet. The tapestry blends into the wall, like it's always been there, because it has. A sprawling scene of shepherds tending sheep under an impossible blue sky, all stitched with gold thread and imported dyes. It's the sort of thing that makes nobles nod in appreciation, and servants pretend not to notice while dusting behind it. But there's a faint ripple along the edge, a place where the weave doesn't quite sit flat. Most pass by without ever feeling it brush their sleeve. You pause. You've passed this hallway hundreds of times. It always smells faintly of beeswax and lavender polish, warmed by the sunlight that filters in from the arched windows nearby. But this morning, it's different. There's no one here. The hall is silent, and your hand lingers just a moment too long on the fabric. It moves, just slightly, enough to expose the dark seam hidden beneath it. Your fingers trace along it, pulse suddenly loud in your ears. There's no visible handle, but you feel the faint groove, just where your knuckles align. You press gently and hear the softest click. The panel opens inward. What greets you isn't a room or a closet, but a narrow, slanted passage that breathes cooler air out into the hallway like an exhale. Dust motes spiral in the light, spilling through the seam. The smell is different inside: stone, old paper, something dry and half forgotten. You glance back toward the corridor to be sure no one is watching. Then you step through, and the door clicks shut behind you, sealing you into the hush. The walls are plain, unpainted wood. Close, almost too close. Just wide enough to walk sideways in places, to slide past hanging ropes and beams that support floors above. Versailles is built for appearances. This is what's behind them. It's darker here. The light from the hallway is gone, replaced by the flicker of a candle stub mounted in a crude iron sconce. You pass it carefully, your shadow dancing across the grainy walls. The passage twists left, then right, and narrows again into a shallow slope descending beneath the floors where nobles dine and argue over who wore which silk better. You know where this passage leads. At least, you think you do. Every servant has heard whispers. Some say the queen used it to slip away from her ladies-in-waiting when she wanted a moment alone. Others claim ministers met their mistresses in these corridors while pretending to fetch reports. And then there's the rumor no one dares speak too loudly, that the king himself used it to spy on his own council, listening through hidden panels to hear who truly served France and who merely served themselves. It isn't marked on any official map, of course. These corridors never are. They're known by memory, by repetition, by whispered instruction, passed from one steward to the next. They are the palace's nervous system. Quiet, efficient, invisible. You duck beneath a low beam and pause at a fork. Left leads toward the chapel, you think? Right might reach the Queen's private library. You take the right path. The floor creaks once beneath your heel, and you freeze. It's not loud, but in a place like this, any noise feels too much. Nothing stirs. You keep moving. Eventually, you come to a small alcove, barely the size of a wardrobe. Inside is a chair, plain and worn, with a threadbare cushion. A candle holder sits on a ledge beside it, and beneath it, a shelf full of folded scraps of paper. Not letters, notes. Dozens of them. Some tied with ribbon, others hastily folded and stacked. You pick one up carefully. The ink is faded, but the words are clear enough. Meet behind the terrace balustrade. Midnight. No guards. Another reads, he knows. Burn this. Your fingers tingle. You shouldn't be reading this. You replace the note, tuck it precisely back beneath its neighbor, and pull away, your heart thudding. Further down, the passage takes a sharp turn and begins to rise. You follow it upward, spiraling tight as a snail shell, until it opens to another hidden door, this one behind a heavy velvet curtain on the second floor of the Queen's drawing room. You don't open it. You listen. Voices, low and sharp, arguing. A name, Lambale. Then silence. Then the clink of glass. You imagine someone pouring wine, trying to smooth over whatever was just said. You hear a soft laugh, too forced. Then footsteps, heels across marble. You step back into shadow, just as the laughter fades. You descend again, deeper now, into a section of passage you don't recognize. It grows colder. The air smells of limestone and damp fabric. You wonder if anyone's used this part recently, or ever. And then, abruptly, you reach a dead end. Almost. The wall looks solid, but there's a gap barely wide enough for 2 fingers. You push just once, and the panel swings open like a sigh. You're in a wine cellar. Dusty bottles line ancient shelves. Barrels slump in damp corners. And standing across the room, near an open cabinet, is someone in court dress. Not a servant, not a guard. You freeze. He turns slowly. You know his face. A minister, one of the king's trusted men. Or at least, once trusted. He's holding a letter. You don't see what it says, but his eyes widen when he notices you. Neither of you speaks. He folds the paper without a word, tucks it into his waistcoat, and walks calmly past you into the passage you just left. He doesn't ask what you're in there. He doesn't need to. Back in the corridor, you close the panel carefully and sit down for a moment on the wooden steps. You feel not afraid, exactly. Not yet, but aware. Suddenly, painfully aware of how much the palace hides, and how easily you could disappear into it. These secret corridors weren't built for emergencies. They were built for discretion, for pleasure, for politics, for all the things Versailles wasn't supposed to be, but always was. You rise, retrace your steps, and find your way back to the tapestry. You slip out silently and straighten the edge of the scene, a shepherd reaching toward a lamb, like nothing ever happened. But now, whenever you walk these halls, you see them differently. Every panel a potential doorway, every mirror a veil, every hallway a question. Because Versailles may glitter on the surface, but beneath it, it listens. You learn quickly not to ask questions. Not when a lady of the court hands you a folded note without looking you in the eye. Not when a valet brushes past in a corridor at midnight with a cloak draped over his arm and cologne strong enough to overpower the stale torch smoke. And especially not when a door that should be locked, absolutely, unquestionably locked, is slightly ajar, and you hear soft laughter inside. Versailles is not just marble and mirrors. It is also velvet and secrets. And secrets, at least here, have a bedtime. The passage you enter tonight is behind a gilded panel in the south wing, hidden behind a statue of Mercury holding a scroll. If you didn't know it was there, you'd never think to touch the base of the pedestal and press. Hard, at the spot just under the god's foot. The door opens with a whisper of air, and you step into the narrow corridor with practiced quiet. You've been sent with a tray of chocolate and a flask of wine. No questions asked. The instructions were exact. Do not knock. Do not speak. Just leave it inside the second room on the left. You're told not to wait. You're told to forget what you saw. So of course, you remember everything. The second door on the left is slightly open. You nudge it further, and the scent of candle wax and roses spills out like a fog. The room is dim, just one candle burning on the far table, and the curtains are drawn over the single tiny window, muffling any sound from the gardens beyond. You step in, set the tray down, and turn to leave. But your eyes catch the velvet slippers by the bed. One pair is unmistakably feminine, embroidered silk, ivory-colored, the kind that never touches dirt. The other pair, black and polished, belongs to someone you saw standing beside the king earlier this morning. You back away slowly, careful not to make a sound. You don't want to see more. You've seen enough. You're halfway into the corridor again when you hear it, the faint sound of a kiss. Not the dramatic kind in paintings, but the quiet, familiar kind people share when they think they're safe. You don't know her name, not really. You know how her maids refer to her. You know she always orders jasmine soap. You know she once threw a glass at a footman for wrinkling her fan. But in here, none of that matters. In here, she's just a silhouette in candlelight. And the man with her? His face flashes through your mind like a loose thread pulled too hard. He's the one who argued with the finance minister last week, red-faced and loud. Now here he is, whispering into her hair. You slip the panel closed behind you, heart thudding. It's not about the affair. Everyone at Versailles has someone, or several someones. Affairs are as common as powdered wigs. They blossom like mold in the corners of the palace, quiet, inevitable, and just as difficult to scrub out. What matters is who's watching. Who knows? Who's listening from behind the panels like you just did? There's a reason these corridors exist. They weren't built merely for servants. They were designed for discretion, for midnight trysts and whispered alliances, for avoiding eyes and slipping between rooms like smoke. It's said the king had 3 different passageways that led from his apartments to his mistress's chambers. Some say the queen had 4. No one dares confirm. You pass a staircase and pause. There's a faint line of dust, freshly disturbed, leading upward. You follow it on instinct, just a few steps, and find yourself at a tiny door with a handle carved like a swan's neck. You know this one. Behind it is the back entrance to the opera box, the box reserved for important guests, often empty, or so the public thinks. You don't open the door. You don't need to. The memory of what you found there 2 weeks ago, perfume still hanging in the air, a glove tucked behind the bench, tells you enough. Someone was here, someone important, and someone else probably knew. That's the danger of Versailles. Not the scandals themselves, but the knowledge of them. Everyone is watching everyone, and everyone has something to hide. You retreat back down the stairs, your candle flickering wildly now. You swear you hear footsteps in the walls, but you don't wait to check. Maybe it's a rat. Maybe it's another servant. Maybe it's someone with more to lose than you. You exit through a panel behind the king's billiards room and rejoin the world of the visible. Laughter filters through the marble hall as courtiers sip brandy and lean in too close to people they'll deny in the morning. The room smells of powdered wigs and expensive sweat. You return your tray to the scullery, not speaking a word, and receive another note to deliver. This one is sealed in red wax. The crest belongs to a duke, whose wife has been conspicuously ill for several weeks. You slip it into your apron and move on. Historians will tell you Versailles was a stage, but what they forget is how many scenes played out behind the curtain. How many lovers made promises by candlelight that would later shape laws. How many secrets were traded in return for land, titles, or silence? You know, you've seen them, and you'll never tell a soul, because you want to live long enough to deliver the next tray. You thought you were alone. Most people at Versailles do. That's the grand illusion. The palace wears its mirrors like a mask, reflecting endless light, making the place seem transparent. But behind those mirrors, behind the panels and painted ceilings, there are passages. And behind those passages, there are eyes. You've always known the corridors existed. Every servant learns about them, whispered over bread crusts in the scullery or mumbled during late-night polishing shifts. But tonight is different. Tonight, you're in them on purpose. Candle in hand, flame flickering against the wooden walls, you move deeper than you've ever dared before. Past the service stairs, past the linen vault, into the arteries of the palace where no maps exist. The passageway narrows to shoulder width. The air smells of candle wax and old cedar. You duck beneath a low beam, step carefully over a loose board, and pause at a junction. The wall here looks solid, but there's a crack running along its base, a clue for anyone who knows to look. You press your palm flat against it and push until the hidden door swings inward, revealing a slit of darkness beyond. Inside, the air changes. It's cooler, still. You can almost hear your own heartbeat echoing off the wood. And then you notice it, a small round hole in the panel ahead, no larger than your thumb, perfectly placed at eye level. You lean in, one eye against the opening, and see light. It takes a moment for your vision to adjust. On the other side is one of the king's private salons. You recognize the marble columns, the deep green drapes embroidered with gold. There's no one there right now, just a single chair angled toward the fire, still crackling in its grate. But someone could sit here for hours and watch without ever being seen. You pull back, pulse quickening. It's not just this room. Further along, there are more holes. One behind the council chamber, another peeking into the queen's drawing room. And not rough holes drilled by careless hands. These are precise, crafted intentionally, long before your time. You continue moving, candle held low, and the shadows flicker across more secret openings. Some smaller, barely wide enough to see through. Others larger, ringed with a thin brass frame to prevent splinters. You pass one that overlooks the royal chapel from high above, giving a perfect view of every bowed head, every murmured prayer. You realize with a chill that the palace isn't just a home, it's a machine, and you're inside its gears now. There's a stool left by one of the panels, old, worn smooth by years of use. On it sits a crust of bread, half-eaten. Someone's been here recently. You glance around but hear nothing, just the crackle of a candle flame and your own uneven breath. You whisper, "Is someone there?" Silence, then a faint rustle, soft, like fabric brushing against stone. You hold your breath, straining to listen. The sound doesn't repeat, but the feeling lingers, like someone else is watching you watch. You step carefully now, slower, more deliberate. The corridor seems to stretch endlessly, winding around itself like a snake. You pass another junction where two tunnels meet and glimpse yet another viewing panel. This one looks down into the hall of mirrors. From here, it's not the grand, glittering spectacle the public sees. It's quiet, shadowed. You see dust motes floating through stray beams of moonlight. And you notice, for the first time, that there are cracks in the gilding. Tiny ones, like hairline fractures in a grand illusion. You wonder who else has stood here before. Valets? Ministers? The king himself? There are rumors that he would slip into these corridors during late-night council meetings, listening to what was said behind his back. You pause at another eye hole and look through. This time, the queen's chamber again. She's there now, standing by the window in a pale robe, her face half lit by moonlight. Her hands rest on the sill, unmoving. You can't see her expression, only her silhouette. And yet you feel as if you're intruding on something sacred, or maybe something terribly sad. You pull away quickly, guilt prickling your skin like cold air. Further along, the corridor opens into a wider space, a service niche lined with wooden benches. You find a stub of candle melted onto a stone shelf, long burned out. Scraps of paper litter the floor, some crumpled, some folded, some half burned. You pick one up, smoothing it carefully. The conked nose. Move carefully. You don't recognize the handwriting, but the message is clear enough. This isn't just gossip. This is survival. You replace the paper exactly where you found it, hands shaking slightly now. Historians still argue about who really controlled Versailles. Was it the king? The queen? The ministers? But standing here, in the dark between the walls, you know the truth. It wasn't just the ones on the throne. It was the ones in the shadows. The ones with eyes pressed to hidden panels, ears tuned to whispers behind gold doors. It was the watchers who controlled everything, precisely because they never appeared in any portrait. You turn now, ready to leave, retracing your steps through the narrowing halls, your candle flickering with each breath. When you emerge back into the familiar service corridor, your uniform dusty, your heart still racing, no one looks up, no one notices. And that's as it should be, because here at Versailles, the most powerful eyes are always the ones no one sees. There's a certain grace to deception at Versailles. It never comes storming down hallways in boots. It glides quietly across waxed floors and satin saws, offers a gentle curtsy, and disappears before anyone can ask where it went. You learn this not from books, not from instruction, but from watching, closely, silently, from places no one knows you stand. Tonight, you're back in the passageways, not by accident, not out of duty, but because the corridors whisper to those who listen. And lately, they've been whispering a lot. Earlier today, you were cleaning the baseboards outside the Queen's dressing room when a folded slip of paper fluttered from between two cushions on a discarded chair. You didn't open it, not immediately, but the wax seal, blue, smooth, unmarked, was odd. Too plain for a love letter, too careful for something casual. You waited until no one was looking. Then you slipped it into your apron and disappeared into the linen closet. You opened it by the light of a dying taper. Northwest corridor. The second panel past the Apollo door. Midnight. Bring no light. That's all it said. So here you are now, walking in total darkness, one hand trailing against the wall, counting the doors. You know these halls by feel. You've polished their wood with your own hands, memorized their patterns through repetition. At the second panel, you stop. You press lightly. It opens without resistance. Inside, the air is still. It smells faintly of jasmine and wax, two scents that don't belong in a storage crawlspace. You press forward, steps muffled by the thick rug beneath your shoes. Your eyes adjust. You realize the room you're in now was once a dressing space. A narrow bench lines one wall. Opposite you is a spy hole, this one larger than usual, with a thin mesh screen across it to diffuse the light. You lean in. What you see on the other side makes your stomach clench. It's not a secret meeting room, not a lover's hideaway. It's the Queen's private salon, the real one, where only a handful of trusted ladies are allowed to enter. And standing near the fire, speaking in low tones, is one of them. You recognize her immediately. You've seen her dozens of times, trailing behind the Queen like a second shadow. She's always laughing a little too loudly, always asking the right questions. But now her laughter is gone. Her posture is stiff. And in her gloved hand is a folded letter. She's not alone. A man stands with her. Not a noble, not with those boots worn at the toes or that coat, which looks tailored for movement more than fashion. A courier, perhaps, or something else. Their voices don't carry through the screen, but the intent is obvious. She hands him the letter. He tucks it away beneath his coat. You blink, and just like that, he's gone. She waits a moment longer, adjusts her bodice, replaces the fan in her hand, then turns and exits the room as if nothing happened. You back away from the peephole, slowly, carefully. You understand now that this wasn't a slip. This was an invitation. Someone wanted you to see. You return to your cot that night, with your head swimming. Who left the note for you? Who knew you'd find it? And why show you something so dangerous? It isn't your first time brushing against the edge of court secrets. You've delivered messages that made ministers pale. You fetched shawls from rooms that reeked of perfume and panic. But this is something larger, something deliberate. The next day, you watch her from the corner of the Queen's receiving room. She never looks at you, not directly. But once, as she adjusts her earring, her gaze lingers a fraction too long in your direction. Not a stare, not a threat, just a message. You saw, and now you know. You start to notice things after that. A maid who always seems to be tidying near the diplomatic wing, though she isn't assigned there. A valet who lingers outside the assembly chamber, holding a coat for a man who never enters. A pile of ash in a fireplace with the faint, bitter scent of burned parchment. You keep your mouth shut, because at Versailles, silence isn't just survival, it's currency. There's a story among the older servants about a woman who once overheard too much. She was reassigned to a chateau in the countryside, officially to care for linens. Unofficially, no one ever heard from her again. Whether it's true doesn't matter. It's told like it is, and that's enough. One evening, you're summoned to carry wine to a private study, not the king's, but a chamber used by his brother. When you arrive, the room is empty, save for the gentle ticking of a clock and a blue wax seal half melted on the writing desk. You recognize it instantly. You leave the tray, turn, and walk out without a word. That night, in the passage behind the Hall of Mirrors, you pause near one of the hidden slots, just to look, just to see if the world has shifted again. The salon is full. The Queen sits regally in her chair, surrounded by laughter and music. The woman in blue stands to her right, smiling, fan fluttering delicately in her hand. But her eyes are watching something else entirely. You wonder then, how many games she's playing, how many letters she's written, how many secrets she's traded for favors or safety or something else entirely. And you wonder too, how long before someone writes a letter about her, or about you. At Versailles, there are no accidents. Every misplaced glove, every stolen glance, every closed door has meaning. And behind the walls, where the air is still and the dust never settles, those meanings are passed from one pair of eyes to the next. You fold the note you found that started all of this and slip it into the hem of your apron, just in case someone ever asks how you knew. Because knowing is dangerous, but not knowing is worse. Most servants at Versailles know about the hidden corridors. Fewer know where they all lead, and fewer still know that not all those passageways were built for whispered gossip or secret affairs. Some were made for one purpose only: escape. You stumble across your first one by accident. It's early morning, too early for candlelight, but too dark in the western galleries to trust your footing. You've been tasked with delivering fresh linens to a visiting Marquis' quarters. His first time at Versailles, they say, and already unimpressed with the thread count. You take a wrong turn, the kind only a sleepy mind would make, and brush against a wall where there should be none. At first, you think it's just a loose panel, a fault in the carpentry. But when you lean your weight against it, the panel swings inward with a heavy breath of cool, dry air. No gilding, no paint. Just stone steps leading downward into a passage that smells of earth and iron. You hesitate. Then curiosity pulls you forward. The steps are narrow and uneven, carved directly into the foundation. No polished wood here, no lavender wax. Just rough stone and the kind of silence that feels deliberate. You hold your breath as you descend, one hand tracing along the wall for balance. The air grows colder with each step, and there's a dampness that clings to your skin like mist. At the bottom, the corridor widens slightly. You pause, eyes adjusting, and realize this isn't just a forgotten storage area. There are lantern brackets set into the stone walls, old, rusted, but carefully placed. And the path continues onward, sloping gradually up and away from the palace. You follow. It's not long before the corridor opens into a wider chamber, bare, except for a scattering of wooden crates and old leather harnesses left to rot. And then you see it. A door set into the far wall, disguised as part of the stone itself. Seamless, except for a small iron latch hidden beneath a false molding. You push it open, and suddenly you're standing outside. Not in the grand courtyards or the manicured gardens, but beyond them, near the outer stables. Near the forest, you step back in quickly, heart pounding. That door wasn't meant for show. It was meant for survival. If the palace ever burned, if there was ever an attack, or worse, back inside, you close the panel behind you, taking care to remember exactly where the latch sits. Over the next few days, you start looking closer. Now that you know what to look for, the signs are everywhere. Scuff marks on the floor in places that see no foot traffic. Walls with subtle seams too clean to be accidents. Faint scratches near the base of service doors where a latch might sit hidden from the untrained eye. You keep quiet about what you found, but you notice how the older stewards move through the palace now. How certain valets pause just a moment too long near particular panels. You start hearing whispers too, quiet ones. Not about love affairs or debts, but about the South Tunnel and the Dauphin's Door. One afternoon, while helping polish the railings on the king's private staircase, you catch sight of two guards conferring quietly over a folded map. You don't see the whole thing, but what you glimpse isn't Versailles public layout. It's something else. Narrow lines crisscrossing beneath the palace, marked with tiny circles and arrows. You're not supposed to know about those maps, but now you do. You begin to wonder how many times these escape routes have been used already. It's not just idle curiosity. You've seen the looks on the faces of certain nobles lately, the tension in the assembly. The way news from Paris arrives quicker now, heavier with implication. Even the king seems to move more carefully these days, less grand, more deliberate. You remember the fire that broke out in the servants' wing last month. Only a minor blaze, contained quickly. But during the confusion, there was a moment when no one could find the queen. And then, just as suddenly, she reappeared in the salon, perfectly composed, as if she had never left. You know now she hadn't been upstairs. She'd been in the walls. The more you pay attention, the more you see. Trapdoors built into floorboards beneath thick carpets. False back panels in wardrobes. A stairwell behind the chapel that doesn't appear on any public tour, but leads directly to the stables. You start practicing the routes yourself when no one's watching. Walking them in the dark, counting steps, memorizing turns. It becomes a private ritual. A way to feel steady in a palace that seems to shake more with each passing week. You keep wondering how many plans were made in these tunnels. How many whispered decisions. Which ministers practiced their route in secret, quietly running through the palace's veins while everyone else drank wine in the salons. One night, while walking the route again, you pause in a narrow corridor and lean your back against the cold stone wall. There's something comforting about the quiet down here. No music, no court politics, no powdered wigs. Just stone, air, and the quiet knowledge that if everything above collapses, there is still a way out. You run your hand along the wall, feeling for the next latch. And as your fingers find it, you smile slightly. Versailles may glitter on the surface, but beneath it, it runs on something far older. Caution, and those who know where the doors are never truly get trapped. By now, You know the palace like a second skin. Every curve of the walls, every dip in the stairs, the public halls and the servant routes, the hidden arteries beneath them all. And still, there's one thing that never sits easy. How easily a person can disappear inside Versailles. It happens more often than anyone admits. One day, a familiar face is gone, a scullery maid, quiet and careful, always first in line for morning duties. By evening, her name is already fading. A valet mutters that she left to care for a sick relative. A steward shrugs and says she was reassigned to some distant estate. But you've seen both stories recycled before, and you know how quickly Versailles rewrites itself. Her bed is folded away by nightfall, her duties absorbed by others. By tomorrow, it's as if she never existed. You notice it again weeks later. An older steward vanishes without so much as a word. A man with a limp everyone recognized by sound before sight, suddenly not there. No name on the morning rolls, no farewell. His chamber left ajar, as though he'd simply stepped out for air and forgotten to return. But you've learned enough now to understand there are no small oversights here. At Versailles, disappearances aren't accidents, they're arrangements. The more you pay attention, the more you see them. Quiet vanishing points hidden in plain sight. Trapdoors tucked behind cabinetry. Dead-end hallways that aren't really dead ends. One morning while dusting the Dauphin's wing, you find a wall panel slightly ajar near the far corner. Inside is no grand escape tunnel, just a tiny closet, windowless, silent. You step in and feel the old air press against your skin, heavier than it should be. In the corner, the stub of a candle, long burned out. A handkerchief crumpled in the dust. A single cracked shoe buckle. It's a place meant for waiting, for hiding, maybe for slipping away entirely. What stays with you most isn't the physical spaces, though. It's the way people respond. When someone vanishes, Versailles doesn't freeze. It reshapes. Duties are reassigned before questions can be asked. A name is struck from the steward's list as neatly as sweeping away dust. And always the same calm, practiced answer from the overseers. They've been sent elsewhere. No one dares ask where. You've overheard nobles discussing similar absences. Quiet murmurs behind lace fans about a lady who had fallen out of favor. One insists she fled to the countryside. Another swears she's still in the palace, just hidden, kept somewhere in the wings or the sublevels where no visitors go. You've walked those sublevels yourself by now. You believe it. There are rooms no one speaks of, places where the dust never quite settles. You've passed locked doors with no markings, where no light seeps from underneath. Even now, when you close your eyes at night, you picture them. And then there are the roots beneath the king's private staircase. The rough-hewn tunnels you found weeks ago, with rusted iron hooks and worn lantern brackets. You checked them again recently, not out of habit, out of certainty. The floor was swept clean. That unsettled you more than anything else. The dust, always there before, had been cleared away. Someone had used the escape route. And recently, it leaves you wondering, those who vanish, do they leave through those tunnels? Do they step into the walls, disappear into the stone, never to return? Or is it more deliberate, more controlled? An order given in secret, a reassignment that means exile. Or worse. Sometimes, as you stand in the servant quarters, late at night, you think about it too much. Will it ever be you? Not as punishment, necessarily, but as part of the machine Versailles has always been. Maybe you'll overhear something you weren't meant to, or deliver a letter that wasn't meant for your hands. And then one morning, your bed will be empty, your name quietly erased. The hallways will carry on, as if you had never been there at all. You start to carry a map of the secret routes in your mind. Every turn, every latch, every false panel. You don't write it down. Writing things down is dangerous. Instead, each night before you sleep, You repeat the pattern to yourself like a prayer. Left turn, hidden stair, blue panel, stone tunnel, door to the outer gardens. A way out if things go wrong, or a way in if needed. One evening, as you make your usual rounds through the passage behind the king's library, you notice something strange. A candle still burning in a niche that hasn't been used in months. Melted nearly to the base. Fresh wax pooled beneath it. Someone's been here. Recently. You stand there a long moment, listening. The passage is silent, but the air feels warmer than usual, stirred up by movement just before you arrived. And then, just at the edge of your vision, you think you see something. A flicker. Blue silk disappearing around the far corner. A color you know all too well now, one of the Queen's ladies. Or perhaps the Queen herself. You hesitate, then follow. But when you reach the bend, there's nothing there. Only shadows and old stone. You pause, breathing in the silence. You wonder whether someone is standing just beyond sight, holding their breath the same way you are, watching, or whether it was simply the palace playing tricks again, vanishing things, vanishing people. You walk back slowly toward the servant wing, candle flickering low, past the grand staircases and the gilded mirrors, past nobles practicing their practice smiles. And as you move, you catch sight of the moon rising beyond the grand windows. It hangs low over the gardens. And for the first time, it strikes you not as beautiful, but as quiet, watching. Because as much as Versailles holds you in its walls, it isn't the walls that last forever. It's the space between them, the empty rooms, the doors that never open again. And as you prepare the linens for tomorrow's royal breakfast, folding each cloth exactly 4 times, smoothing the creases, you already know where your feet will take you next. The Petit Trianon, a place without panels or spy holes. A world where silk rustles through grass instead of marble corridors. Where the Queen walks not as a sovereign, but as a woman trying to disappear in her own way. Because while some vanish behind walls, others vanish in plain sight. And now it's time to follow. At Versailles, the day begins like a storm. Doors slamming, footsteps echoing down marble halls, orders barked in clipped voices. From the king's grand apartments to the servants' quarters, tucked beneath the rafters, mourning is a mechanical thing, rigid, relentless, impossible to ignore. But at the Petit Trianon, mourning is something else entirely. It arrives softly, like silk falling through the air. No bells, no horns, no shouts, just light, spilling quietly through half-shuttered windows. You notice the difference the first time you walk those smaller, more human hallways. There are no crowds waiting outside the Queen's bedroom door. No queue of ministers hoping for a moment's favor. Just a handful of attendants, speaking in whispers so low they could be mistaken for the wind in the garden trees. It feels less like a palace and more like a private house, a quiet one. A house where everyone understands that the Queen is not to be rushed. Your morning duties here are simple. Bring hot water, light the fire, open the shutters only halfway. Everything is done deliberately slower than you were taught at Versailles. At the Grand Palace, everything happens with speed and flourish. Curtains thrown back in one grand movement, perfume applied in clouds. Here, everything is muted. You slip into the Queen's chamber like a shadow, placing the water basin on its stand. The fire is never allowed to go fully out at night, so you only need to stir it gently back to life, coaxing the embers awake without making noise. Her bed is large, but not absurdly so. No towering canopy embroidered with gold thread. Just pale blue silk covers, cool linen sheets. A single dog curled at the foot, a small white spaniel with ears like curled ribbon. The Queen herself sleeps late here, not because she is lazy, but because she can. At Versailles, her day is not her own. But at the Petit Trianon, she decides when the day begins. That is the unspoken rule among the staff. The queen rises when she wishes. Until then, no one enters except to perform the barest essentials. You've seen her waking only once or twice, when the shutters have let in just a sliver too much light, or when a servant accidentally lets a shoe creak on the polished floor. She stirs slowly, unlike most nobles you've served. No panic chump, no immediate reaching for bell cords or commands. Just a quiet stretch beneath the coverlet, one hand slipping free to press against the sheet beside her. She does not open her eyes immediately. You get the sense she enjoys those first few moments of quiet, between sleep and waking, before duty wraps around her again like a corset. When she does rise, there is no formal lever here, no public ritual of dressing, no audience of courtiers crowding to glimpse the queen's morning toilet. Only 2 or 3 ladies-in-waiting are present, trusted and long assigned to her private circle. You may help set out the linen shift, but you do not speak unless spoken to. The queen prefers silence in the mornings, silence and simple things. Her clothing here surprises you. Not towering silk gowns with hoops so wide they could block a hallway. No jewels. No stiff bodices that require 3 women to lace her into them. Instead, pale muslin dresses. Cream, soft blues, faded greens. Gowns so simple, they would look rustic in the Versailles salons, but here feel perfectly at home. She favors a straw hat, one with a wide brim and a trailing ribbon. You tie it for her sometimes, smoothing the fabric beneath her chin while she watches herself in the mirror. And that mirror, too, is simpler than you expect. No gilded frame, no elaborate crest, just plain wood, polished and quiet. There is something about the way she stands before it each morning that stays with you. It isn't vanity. It's a kind of ritual. A moment to set her face for the day, not as a queen, but as a woman who has chosen to escape, if only for a little while. Once dressed, she often moves through the house alone. That, too, is strange to witness. At Versailles, she cannot move from one room to another without being followed by dozens of people. But here, she walks without even a footman in her shadow. You trail discreetly, as you're supposed to, but never too close. She touches things as she walks. The back of a chair, the edge of a curtain, the smooth marble of a fireplace mantel. It is as though she is reminding herself that this world belongs to her in a way Versailles never did. Her steps eventually take her out into the gardens. Even before breakfast, she likes to walk there. You follow through the smaller service doors, hands clasped, head down. The gardeners are already at work, trimming hedges, sweeping gravel paths, but they know to keep their distance. No loud greetings. No elaborate bows. Here, the queen walks like any other woman in her garden, watching the roses, tilting her head to listen for birdsong. And yet, you can't help but notice the difference in her posture here. At Versailles, her back is always straight, her chin lifted a fraction higher than natural. But here, her shoulders round slightly. Her gaze drops to the ground instead of scanning the faces around her. It is not sloppiness, it is peace. You carry a tray out to one of the garden pavilions later that morning, placing it on a small table beneath a flowering trellis. Tea, honey, a slice of fresh bread. Not the elaborate displays she has served in the grand halls. Simpler things. Things you imagine she might have chosen herself, rather than from a list prepared by a steward. When she sits down to eat, she thanks no one aloud. That is not her way, but there is a kind of softness in her silence. An understanding that here, at least, no one is performing. As you watch her from the corner of your eye, sitting with her tea, the wind gently stirring her ribbons, you realize something else. The Petit Trianon is the only place in France where Marie Antoinette wakes up as herself first, and as queen second. The difference is subtle but real, and it changes everything about how the day feels. By late morning, the sun hangs over the Petit Trianon in a way that feels almost private, soft, golden, never harsh. The light here doesn't glare, like it does on the polished floors of Versailles. It dapples instead, filtering through trees, reflecting off fountains, warming the stones of paths that wind more lazily than those back at the main palace. The gardens here are different. You can feel it in your chest, in the pace of your footsteps. No one is rushing, not even the queen. She's already awake and dressed by the time you arrive with the day's instructions. She's chosen a simple muslin gown again, cream with pale lilac trim, and a wide straw hat that casts a veil of shadow over her face. She wears no powder, no diamonds. Her shoes are soft leather, not satin. And when she walks, it is not with the posture of someone performing royalty, but with the calm grace of a woman who believes, at least for now, that she belongs in this place. Your task this morning is to accompany her on her usual tour of the gardens, though accompany might be too strong a word. You're there to remain 3 steps behind, to carry a small parasol, to step forward only if she asks you to. Mostly, you are meant to vanish into the background. Still, even from that distance, you notice how differently she moves when she's here. There's less stiffness in her shoulders. She doesn't scan the hedges for observers. She doesn't lead with her chin the way she does when walking through Versailles galleries. Here, she is not the Queen of France. She is a woman in her garden. The scent of the garden is overwhelming in the best way. Orange blossom, lavender, and a faint trace of sweet alyssum blend into something that doesn't even feel man-made. You pass flowering arches that seem to bloom just as she approaches, as though the plants themselves recognize her. The walkways are gravel, but not coarse. Just enough crunch underfoot to remind you this is still nature, or at least a version of it. Everything here is cultivated to look effortless. The flower beds curve gently. The hedges are clipped to resemble natural waves, not boxy geometry. Even the wild grass along the edges is carefully unkempt, designed to look spontaneous, though it takes hours of tending to maintain. Eventually, as she always does, the queen begins her walk toward the hamlet. You follow, the path narrowing as it leaves the more formal gardens and slips into something that resembles the countryside, or what nobles believe the countryside should be. Beyond the trees and climbing roses lies a perfect little village, too charming to be real. Thatched roof cottages arranged in an artful arc, each one aged just so. There's a mill with a wheel that turns steadily, though it grinds no grain. A working dairy, sort of. Goats and chickens, yes, but hand-picked and scrubbed until their coats gleam like waxed furniture. You've worked back here before. You know the rules. The animals must always be visible, but never too loud. The mud should stay on one side of the path only. The vegetables must look fresh, but should not be eaten unless specifically requested. It's all a performance, but one the queen seems to enjoy more than any ball or opera. She walks among the cottages without an escort. The guards stay behind, near the tree line, barely visible. Her hands are gloved, but unadorned. She lifts her dress slightly to avoid a puddle and smiles, not at anyone, but to herself. Sometimes she picks herbs from the garden, not because she needs them, but because she wants the feel of mint or thyme between her fingers. She brushes her fingertips against the tops of cabbage leaves. She asks the gardener a question about bees. This place is hers, not just by title, but by intention. It's said she personally approved the roof angles, the size of the wooden doors, even the grain of the wood used for the shutters. She didn't inherit the hamlet. She created it. Not to farm, of course, not to live humbly, but to choose when and how she would appear to live simply. That choice for her is everything. From where you stand, half in shadow beneath a cherry tree, you watch her lean down and speak softly to a child holding a bucket of grain. She laughs at something the child says, genuinely, her teeth visible as she tilts her head back slightly. That laugh isn't her at Versailles. Not like that. She wears the look of someone at ease, but not unaware. She knows this farm is curated, that the simplicity is artificial. But that doesn't make it meaningless. She doesn't want the hardship of country life, only the intimacy, the peace, the stillness. And even that, she knows, will only last as long as the page doesn't turn. You carry a tray to one of the smaller garden houses where she sometimes takes her noon refreshment. Cheese, a bit of bread, chilled white wine in a glass, so fine it might shatter if you breathe on it wrong. She accepts the tray with a small nod, says nothing, and gestures for you to leave it near the open window. You do as asked, stepping away before she sits down. A few minutes later, you pass back by the window and see her sitting alone, bareheaded now, hair loose at her shoulders, her fingers pinching a grape by its stem. There is no one to perform for, no one to watch. Still, she keeps her spine straight, her face unreadable. The wind picks up slightly. It carries the smell of the nearby fields, fresh hay, warm wood, the faintest tinge of animals. Not unpleasant, just real. She closes her eyes for a moment, and you realize she might be pretending to be someone else entirely. Not a queen, not even Marie Antoinette. Just a woman in a cottage, tasting her own grapes and listening to birdsong. The moment doesn't last long. A footman appears near the edge of the garden, carrying a sealed envelope. News from Versailles, no doubt. Her posture tightens instantly. The spell breaks. She takes the letter with a soft word and dismisses him, but something has changed. Her fingers tap the envelope once before setting it aside, unopened. You see it in her face. She will read it later, but she already knows what it contains. She doesn't need words to tell her that her escape is temporary. Still, she lingers. She rises slowly, dusts her skirt, and turns back toward the winding path. You fall into step behind her, not too close. The gardens welcome her return without ceremony. The illusion, for now, continues. By midday, the quiet simplicity of the morning begins to shift. The queen, who spent her early hours wandering gardens and playing at country life, now moves toward a more familiar rhythm, one that echoes Versailles, but on a smaller, more controlled scale. The luncheon at the Petit Trianon is not a public spectacle like the grand dinners at the main palace. Here, it is selective, intentional, carefully managed down to the last folded napkin and polished fork. And it is here where the queen gathers what many call her inner circle. You see the preparations long before anyone else arrives. The dining room is smaller than anything at Versailles. No endless table stretching beneath crystal chandeliers. Instead, a round table, large enough for perhaps 8 or 9 at most. The walls are painted pale green with delicate white moldings, and tall windows open directly onto the gardens. Light filters through sheer curtains, making the room feel weightless, more salon than dining hall. Your first duty is to lay the table. It must be perfect, but not ostentatious. Simple silver cutlery polished to a mirror sheen. Porcelain plates from Sevres, each rimmed in soft gold, but without elaborate designs. The queen prefers plain white here, which feels strange after the riot of color at Versailles. Fresh flowers, roses, small blue cornflowers are arranged in low vases so as not to block conversation. The scent is faint, controlled. Even the bread is chosen carefully. Not loaves stacked high like in the main palace kitchens, but slim baguettes cut into neat slices, brushed lightly with butter. As the queen enters, she's no longer in her garden dress. Someone has helped her change into something finer, still softer than court fashion, but closer to it. Pale silk, ivory with faint embroidery at the sleeves. Her hair is pinned higher now, though not powdered. A simple ribbon woven into the style is the only ornament. The guests begin arriving shortly after. Always the same faces, more or less. The Princess de Lamballe, the queen's closest companion, who walks as though every room belongs to her by birthright. Madame de Polignac, smiling slyly beneath half-lowered eyelids. A few others, a duke, perhaps, or a favored poet. Never politicians, never ministers. This is not the place for them. You stand back as the queen greets each guest with quiet ease. There's no bowing and scraping here. No formal addresses. Names are spoken plainly. Laughter is allowed. And though everything about the luncheon looks effortless, you know it's anything but. The meal begins with a soup, light, not heavy, flavored with herbs from the Trianon's own garden. The queen prefers fresh vegetables, soft cheeses, delicate pastries filled with cream. Roasted meats come later, sliced thin and served on silver trays that you carry in with careful balance. Each course is smaller than at Versailles, but more personal. There is no endless parade of servants. Only a few trusted attendants are allowed inside. You catch glimpses of their conversation as you work. It's never about politics here. No debates about grain shortages or uprisings in Paris. That's what makes this circle so controversial beyond these walls. They speak instead of music, poetry, dresses, gossip from Vienna. Someone mentions a new play in the city, and the queen tilts her head thoughtfully, as if considering whether she might attend. At one point, Madame de Polignac says something quietly that makes the queen laugh. Really laugh, no practiced court smile, but a sharp, sudden sound that fills the room for just a moment. You pause in your step, tray balanced in your hands, startled by the rawness of it. It feels like eavesdropping on something too private, but no one notices. The queen dabs at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, still smiling. And you realize, this is her shield. The inner circle is not just about friendship. It's about insulation, from duty, from expectation, from the weight of the crown. Historians still wonder how much influence these women held, whether Madame de Polignac shaped the queen's opinions, or whether Lamballe whispered ideas that became royal decisions. But watching them here, you sense something simpler. They aren't trying to steer the ship of state. They're trying to stay afloat within it, to carve out one small place in a vast, uncontrollable machine where they can feel human again. The luncheon stretches into early afternoon. Servants like you refill glasses, replace plates, fold napkins with practiced ease. The food keeps coming, glazed fruits, marzipan, shaped like tiny birds, a chilled cream custard that makes the guests close their eyes with quiet delight. But beneath it all, there's an edge. You notice it in the queen's hands. When she isn't lifting a glass or cutting a piece of meat, her fingers tap lightly against the table, restless, as if remembering there's a world beyond these walls. A world she cannot control as easily as she controls the flow of this meal. And every so often, her gaze drifts toward the windows, past the gardens, toward the horizon. After the final course, the queen rises with graceful finality. The luncheon is over. Guests stand, chairs scrape softly against polished floors. There is no clapping, no formal toasts. Just quiet farewells, murmured promises to meet again. Some of the guests linger, hesitant to step back into the larger world. You help clear the table as the queen and her ladies step into the adjoining salon. The plates are gathered, the silver polished once more. The flowers, half wilted now, are removed and replaced. By evening, it will be as if the meal never happened. But as you stack the last plate, you catch sight of a single ribbon left on the back of the queen's chair. Pale blue silk, forgotten in the ease of the gathering. You fold it gently and place it aside, knowing someone will retrieve it later. Because while Versailles is a palace of pageantry, the Petit Trianon's inner circle lives and fades like perfume in the air, brief, sweet, and always just out of reach. By late afternoon, the bright warmth that filled the gardens begins to soften. The light slips lower through the tall windows of the Petit Trianon, casting long gold stripes across polished floors and pale green walls. It's during these quieter hours that the rhythm of the queen's day changes. The activities of the morning, gardening, walking, dining with her inner circle, fade away. Now, the palace settles into something slower, heavier. This is the hour for music and for letters. You know the routine well by now. As the sun begins to lower past its peak, you and two other servants begin preparing the Queen's music salon. It isn't a grand room, not like Versailles with its cavernous halls and chandeliers that weigh as much as horses. The salon here feels intimate, wood-paneled walls painted with delicate flowers, tall mirrors framed in white and gold, long drapes tied back just far enough to let in the last of the sunlight. Your first task is to check the harpsichord, a pale ivory instrument with faint traces of gilt along its edges. You dust it carefully, fingers light against the keys to avoid setting off a stray note. The Queen dislikes dissonance before she plays. You position the stool exactly as she prefers, adjusting its height with a small twist of the wooden seat. Then you light the candles. Only 4. Always the same number. 2 on the harpsichord's edge, 2 on the side table next to the Queen's writing desk. The rest of the room stays in shadow. That, too, is deliberate. The Petit Trianon is designed not just for appearances, but for mood. And this hour, the music hour, is where that mood turns inward. At precisely the moment you finish your last candle, the Queen arrives. Always without fanfare, no trumpets, no announcements, just the soft whisper of her silk slippers on the wooden floors. Today, she wears pale gray silk. No lace, no embroidery. Her hair is pinned simply, with just one ribbon to hold it in place. Her face looks thoughtful, but not sad. More like someone balancing on the edge of a thought she can't quite name. You step back as she enters, joining the line of other servants along the wall. Silent, still, watching. The Queen crosses to the harpsichord without hesitation. Some days she requests one of her ladies to play for her. But more often, especially recently, she prefers to play herself. She sits, adjusts her gown, and rests her fingers gently on the keys. The first notes that fill the room are always quiet, delicate, music that feels less like a performance and more like memory. You recognize the patterns now, pieces from Vienna, from her youth. Soft Austrian folk melodies transformed into courtly arrangements. Nothing grand or loud, just simple repeating phrases that weave in and out of the candlelight. The room breathes with the sound. It wraps around everyone standing there, not like an audience, but like shadows in the walls. It's not a concert. It's something closer to prayer. And always, at some point, while the music still plays, the letters arrive. A footman enters quietly, placing a silver tray on the side table. Sealed papers, always in blue wax, no name spoken aloud. The Queen doesn't stop playing when the tray is set down. She finishes her melody first, hands moving with practiced grace across the keys. Only when the final note hangs in the air does she rise and cross to the desk. You watch as she sorts through them. Her fingers are gentle but deliberate. She knows the seal of each writer by touch alone. Some from Paris, some from Vienna. Others, perhaps, from figures no one else in the room would recognize. She opens them one by one, using a slim ivory knife. The paper rustles softly in the stillness. No one speaks. Even the servants seem to hold their breath. Sometimes she smiles faintly at a line. Other times, her lips press into a thin line, unreadable. You've seen her tear letters in half exactly twice. Both times, she did it slowly, precisely, as though even the destruction had to follow a kind of etiquette. After reading, she folds each letter again and places it in a lacquered box beside the desk. A simple black box with silver hinges. You've carried it once yourself, polishing the exterior during morning duties. But you've never opened it. No one does. Once the letters are stored away, the Queen returns to the harpsichord. Sometimes she plays again. Other times she simply sits there, staring at the keys as though waiting for them to speak back to her. The sky outside grows dimmer, and candlelight becomes the only glow in the room. Shadows stretch longer. The music feels heavier now, not sad exactly, but thoughtful, like it's carrying the weight of the letters just read. You can't help but wonder what they contain. Historians still debate that very thing. Were they instructions? Pleas from her mother? Warnings from allies she could no longer trust? But standing there, watching her read and fold and play again, it feels simpler than politics. They are the threads tying her to a world outside these walls. Threads she both wants to keep and wishes she could cut. One evening, after the music has ended and the Queen has retired to her private rooms, you stay behind a moment to extinguish the candles. The room is warm from their light, and the scent of wax lingers in the air. As you move to snuff out the last flame, your eyes catch on the writing desk. The lacquered box is closed, but beside it, left almost as an afterthought, is a single folded sheet. No seal. Just paper, creased once in the middle, resting beneath a smooth stone to keep it from curling. You don't read it. You wouldn't dare. But as you set down the candle snuffer and adjust the edge of the paper so it sits perfectly straight, you feel the weight of it, the quiet message it carries, even unopened. Because while Versailles may echo with speeches and proclamations, here at the Petit Trianon, the Queen speaks to quieter things. A letter folded in candlelight, a melody played for no one, a silence that lingers longer than words ever could. And as you step back into the hall, closing the door softly behind you, the music still seems to play somewhere in the back of your mind. Not loud, but steady. Evening always arrives quietly at the Petit Trianon. There is no cannon fired as there would be at Versailles, no clanging of bells, no announcement to the public. But among those who live and work here, you sense it in the change of movement. Afternoon's easy pace sharpens into preparation. Soft footsteps move more quickly now. Candles are lit along shadowed corridors. And in the Queen's private dressing rooms, silks begin to stir. You've come to know this hour by feel. Even without clocks, you can tell it's time when the light slants at a certain angle across the salon floors, turning golden edges into amber. The Queen's music slows. The private letters are folded away. Now comes the ritual of evening transformation, removing the soft muslins and linens worn in the morning, and stepping once more into the elaborate silken armor expected of a queen. Her gowns for this hour are not as towering or heavy as those worn at Versailles, but they are still gowns meant for attention. They must shimmer under candlelight. They must whisper as she walks, not rustle. And so the chosen gown for tonight waits already on its padded stand in her dressing room. Pale silver silk, almost white in low light, embroidered with faint stars across the hem and sleeves. The work of it is deliberate and precise. You and two others assist her in dressing, each knowing your role down to the smallest motion. The corset is laced more tightly than it was in the morning. Not painfully so. This isn't the king's court, but enough to hold posture and shape. You draw the laces with steady hands, mindful not to leave marks. Another maid adjusts the sleeves. Another pins her hair higher, combing each strand until it lies exactly as it should. Pearls, not diamonds tonight. A ribbon woven through the curls, pale blue to match the sash at her waist. The Queen speaks little while this happens. She stands before the tall mirror, with her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowed not with vanity, but calculation, watching herself assemble layer after layer of image until Marie Antoinette the woman disappears, and Marie Antoinette the Queen returns. You've seen her like this before, watchful, contained. It is not boredom. It is control. The careful tightening of self that begins from the moment the silk sleeves are drawn up over her arms. Once she is dressed, she moves back into the main salon, where her select guests gather. It is never a large crowd, only the same trusted few, Madame de Polignac, the Princess de Lamballe, perhaps a favored poet or musician. They are already waiting, seated in soft chairs arranged in an arc around the fireplace, the room bathed in flickering gold. As the queen enters, conversation rises slightly. Smiles widen. Heads bow just enough to acknowledge her arrival, without turning the evening into formal court theater. You stand along the wall now, part of the background, tray in hand. But your eyes remain on her. The silver stars along her hem catch the candlelight with every step. They look like constellations moving across the floor, stitched into fabric that seems barely solid, more like water than cloth. She carries herself with ease, speaking softly to each guest in turn, asking about a child's health, complimenting a ribbon. Every word is measured, never rushed. Here, in this space, she commands the air around her like a conductor with invisible strings. And yet, as you watch her longer, you see something else, something smaller. It is in the way her fingers adjust the ribbon at her wrist, tightening it when no one else seems to notice. It is in the momentary pause between sentences, where her gaze flickers not at the faces before her, but toward the tall windows and the gardens beyond. A single glance outward, as if measuring how much time remains before this carefully arranged piece must end. You've seen her look out like that more often these past months. The world outside is changing, even as the Petit Trianon holds itself still. The servants feel it in whispers. Rumors from Paris, stories of unrest. But none of that reaches these salons, not directly. Here, there is only silk, pearls, and the illusion that everything remains as it always has been. The evening proceeds slowly. Trays of sugared fruits and pale wines are served. Quiet music plays from a harpsichord in the corner. You notice how every gesture is performed in miniature, smiles that last only as long as necessary, compliments given with just enough warmth to seem sincere. Everyone is playing their part. And at the center of it all stands the queen, wrapped in silver and white, speaking as though nothing could ever truly disturb this balance. But balance is all it is, not safety, not permanence, just balance. Later in the evening, as the guests begin to drift away in pairs and threes, you watch the queen remain seated for just a moment longer, her back perfectly straight, hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair. The silver stars on her gown dim now, catching only the faintest glimmers of light from the last remaining candles. Then she rises, slowly. You step forward with the others as she leaves the room, returning once more to her dressing chamber. The transformation reverses itself now, as carefully as it began. You unlace the corset. Another attendant removes the pearl earrings. One by one, each layer of silk is removed and folded away with reverence. The gown is placed on its padded form again, sleeves arranged as though waiting for her to return. But you know she won't wear it again for several days, perhaps longer. Standing there in her chemise, her hair pinned loosely now, she looks smaller, not fragile, but quieter, like someone setting aside a weight they've carried all day. She glances once more into the mirror before retiring to her private chamber. No words spoken, no orders given. And in that moment, she looks not like a queen, not like a woman trapped in history, but like a person between two roles. Once she's gone, you and the others finish folding linens, extinguish the last candles, straighten the chairs. By morning, this salon will feel like a blank page again. But as you pass by the mirror one last time, you catch a glimpse of your own reflection and can't help but wonder how long the illusion will hold. Because in this place, everything is designed to seem effortless. And yet, every silken gown, every star-stitched hem, every quiet glance toward the window, all of it speaks the same truth. Control here is as carefully arranged as the queen's hairpins, and just as easily undone. Night doesn't arrive at the Petit Trianon the way it does in most places. It doesn't announce itself with sharp edges or clear lines. Instead, it seeps in slowly, filtering through the tall windows in long streaks of indigo and silver, until you can no longer tell where day ends and night begins. Candles burn lower, flames reduce to faint golden halos hovering above polished tables. The air changes, growing cooler, heavier. Even the quiet conversations that fill the afternoon salons begin to fade, not with a single gesture, but in ripples. As guests drift away one by one, their farewells whispered rather than spoken aloud. You feel it first in your own hands as you begin your final tasks, folding fresh linens, carrying the last silver trays back to the service corridor, straightening the silk cushions in the Queen's private salon until each seam lies flat and smooth beneath your palm. The house is not sleeping yet, but it is waiting, holding its breath. By this hour, the Queen herself has withdrawn from her guests. You catch only glimpses of her now, a flash of pale silk disappearing down a hallway, the faint rustle of her dressing robe as she steps from one room to another. Her outer gown has been removed, replaced by a lighter garment, soft cotton embroidered with white silk thread. You carry it once, folded over your arm, and the fabric feels impossibly light, as though it weighs nothing at all. Her hair is brushed loose by now. You've seen it in that rare, quiet moment. Pale gold strands falling past her shoulders, curling slightly at the ends. The image never quite leaves you, no matter how many times you witness it. Marie Antoinette, not as a queen or a symbol, but simply as a woman preparing for bed, her face bare of powder, her hair unbound. Your duties in this hour are practiced to the point of near invisibility. Light the final candle. Set the water basin beside her writing desk. Arrange the fresh sheets on her bed, linen so fine, it slips between your fingers like air. You fold back the coverlet just enough so she can step in easily later, smoothing it afterward so no wrinkles remain. Every movement is quiet, precise, not just for form's sake, but because silence is part of the ritual now. The house has taught you that much. There is no official bedtime here. No grand lever ceremony as at Versailles, where dozens of courtiers would crowd into the royal chamber to witness the king's final moments before sleep. At the Petit Trianon, it's different, private, deliberate, chosen. When the queen enters her chamber, it is often alone. Her footsteps are soft against the wooden floors. Her expression is unreadable, caught somewhere between reflection and resignation. You stand back as she moves to her writing desk, sitting down before it in her robe, lit only by a single candle. The lacquered box waits there as always, its black surface gleaming faintly in the low light. You've seen her open it before, always with the same care, a hand resting lightly on its lid, fingers tracing the mother-of-pearl inlay as though counting the stars carved there. Inside, letters, dozens of them, folded carefully, some tied with ribbons, some left loose. You never see their contents. You never ask. But you know they are important. Letters from Vienna, most likely, from her mother, from her brother, from people she can trust in a world where trust is rarer than diamonds. She doesn't always read them immediately. Some nights, she simply sits there, fingers resting on a folded sheet, eyes unfocused as though reading something written inside her own mind instead of on the page. You watch from the doorway, standing just beyond the reach of candlelight, waiting until she gives a nod or a quiet word that tells you she is ready. When she does choose to read, the motion is slow, deliberate. She uses a small ivory knife to break the wax seal, smoothing the paper flat with both hands before her eyes begin to move across the lines. Her face changes very little as she reads. A flicker in the corner of her mouth, a breath drawn slightly deeper, but otherwise she remains still as stone, lit from below by candle flame and shadow. Historians would later say these letters contained desperate plans, requests for military aid, warnings about revolution. But standing there, in the quiet, with only the sound of the candle's tiny crackle and the faint scratch of paper against wood, it feels simpler, more human. These aren't strategies. They're memories, connections, reminders that somewhere beyond these carefully arranged walls, there are people who know her not as a queen, but as a daughter, a sister, a woman far from home. When she finishes reading, she refolds the letter with the same care she unfolded it, returning it to its place in the box. She closes the lid gently, rests her hand atop it for a long moment, then finally rises and turns toward her bed. You step forward now, helping to pull back the coverlet the rest of the way. You hold the edge as she sits, then slips her feet beneath the sheets. Her hair falls in soft waves against the pillow. Her hands rest lightly atop the coverlet. You notice how pale her skin looks in the candlelight, almost translucent. The candle is extinguished now with a practiced hand. The room falls into complete darkness, except for the faint glow from the crack in the shutters. Moonlight slips in like a silver thread across the floor. You step back into the shadows near the door, standing quietly until you are certain she has no further need of you. But she does not sleep. Not yet. You know this. You've learned it by now. Even after her eyes close, her breathing stays too steady. Her hands move occasionally, fingers curling slightly against the sheets. She lies awake long after the rest of the house has gone still. You've asked yourself why. Some say she carries too many worries. Others whisper of ghosts, that the queen sees faces in the dark, from Paris, from Vienna, from places no longer safe. But you think it's simpler. Marie Antoinette never truly learned how to rest. Even here, in the place she built for peace, her mind keeps moving, replaying conversations, letters, shadows of things she cannot control. You close the door behind you as quietly as it was opened. The latch clicks softly into place. The corridor beyond is cooler now, filled with the faint smell of beeswax and rosewater. You walk back toward the servants' wing, your steps careful not to wake the house. And as you go, you imagine her lying there still, eyes open in the dark, watching the moonlight move across her chamber walls like something just out of reach. Because while the Petit Trianon may look like a sanctuary, you know better. It is a stage. And even the queen must play her part until morning comes again. That is where we finish. The palace has grown quiet. The gardens sleep beneath moonlight. And the queen lies awake, lost in dreams that never quite come. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the echoing marble halls of Versailles to the candlelit passages hidden just beyond the mirrors. From the queen's silken salons to the quiet gardens of the Petit Trianon, where lavender and secrecy hung in the air with equal weight. A long, slow walk through the quieter layers of royal life, through the parts history books often skip, but which still linger like perfume caught in old fabric. If you're still awake with me here at the end, thank you for staying through it all. And if you drifted off somewhere along the way, maybe between the folded letters left unopened on the queen's desk, or while following the quiet shuffle of servants' foots down the hidden staircases, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the point. These stories aren't meant to keep you on the edge of your seat. They're meant to carry you just far enough to let the day's weight ease off your shoulders. I hope tonight's journey felt calm in its own strange way. There's something peaceful about these hidden parts of history, not the grand wars or the loud revolutions, but the quieter hours in between. The moments when someone simply ties the last ribbon on a gown, or when a queen stands alone in front of a darkened window, watching the stars, wondering if anyone else is awake. It's in those smaller details that the real stories tend to live. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly step into the past, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, I'd really enjoy hearing where you're listening from, and what time it was when you pressed play. Whether it's the middle of the night, early morning, or some soft, quiet hour in between, it's always comforting to see where in the world these late-night journeys end up reaching. It's a reminder that even across distance and time zones, there's always someone else out there quietly listening too. Now, as we let go of Versailles for the night, picture the last of the candles being snuffed out one by one. The faint scent of lavender water fading in the cool air. footsteps slowing until there's only silence left in the long corridors. Even the gold on the mirrors seems dimmer now, as if it's sleeping too. Beyond the palace walls, the gardens stand quiet under the moon. The small hamlet lies still, no movement in the cottages, no rustle of silk or soft laughter, just the occasional whisper of wind through tall grass and the steady rhythm of leaves shifting against one another in the dark. Inside, servants pull heavy curtains closed. Silver trays are stacked and stored. Gowns are folded away for another day. Somewhere in her chamber, the queen lies awake. Or perhaps she's finally slipped into sleep, her hands resting lightly on folded linens, her dreams caught somewhere between Vienna and Paris, between what was and what might have been. You can imagine it now, if you'd like. The walls cool to the touch, the stone floors silent under bare feet. A world wrapped in soft shadows. A house that, for a few hours, belongs only to itself and to the quiet. That's the rhythm of history most people miss, the parts after the page turns. The way life keeps moving, even in the stillness. And there's a kind of comfort in knowing that, in remembering that even behind the loudest stories, there were always servants lighting candles, maids folding linens, someone waiting just beyond the door, listening for the smallest sound. So as we end here tonight, I hope wherever you are, things feel quiet enough for rest. Whether you're lying in bed, eyes closed already, or simply letting the sound of my voice fade as the minutes stretch longer. Let the flicker of the last candles at the Trianon fade from your mind. Let the echo of footsteps along parquet floors soften until there's nothing left but stillness. Let the rustle of silk dresses and whispered conversations fade into something as soft as wind through trees. If your thoughts wander now, let them drift gently. Back to the gardens, perhaps, or the quiet corridors, or even further, to places beyond Versailles altogether, to moments of your own life that feel still and private in the same way. That's the spirit of these late-night journeys, not just to tell a story, but to hold open a quiet space where your mind can wander without rush, without noise. If you'd like, you can leave a comment below letting me know where these stories find you. Whether it's a small apartment in the city, a quiet house in the countryside, or just a corner of the world lit by a bedside lamp and the faint glow of your phone screen. It's always a calming thing, reading those messages, seeing where these slower moments land. And if you'd like to return again, I'll be here, with more quiet hours spent wandering through places long past, ancient streets, forgotten palaces, lost cities, always at a pace that lets you rest along the way. For now, I'll let the halls of Versailles grow dark, the silk gowns folded and stored, the hidden corridors quiet behind their panels, the gardens sleeping beneath moonlight and stars that look just a little farther away than they did during the day. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.